November 6th special town meeting 2017 is hereby called into session. I have been informed by the constables that there are in excess of 447 voters present. As a result, we have met the required quorum for some of the articles of 5%. We have, as of the cutoff date, we had 8,922 registered voters. 5% was 447, 3% 268. There are a couple of articles, not all of the articles, that require a quorum, so we have that quorum established as of this moment. I'm going to start by reading the return of the warrant. Okay. Hereof fail not, and make due return of this warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk at the time and place of meeting and election aforesaid, given under our hands this 23rd day of August in the year 2017, signed by all 5 members of the Board of Selectmen, Selectmen of Nantucket, Mass, pursuant to Chapter 39, Section 10 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth and the warrant adopted August 23, 2017, I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Nantucket qualified to vote in town affairs to appear at the times and place and for the purposes within mentioned by posting said notification on August 31, 2017 at the Stop and Shop on Pleasant Street, the Town and County Building at 16 Broad Street, and upon the bulletin boards at the corner of Main and Federal Streets in Syosconset Square. Sworn to under pains and penalties of perjury, Catherine Flanagan Stover, Constable. Thank you. Because this is a special, we're going to not have any of our usual pomp and circumstance. We're going to get kind of right into the meat of things. Just a couple of announcements to make. We have some non-voters. If you're a non-voter, you should be sitting over under the wings. I'm happy to say that we are joined tonight for the first time by the Nantucket High School Political Club, and they are sitting over there watching your every move. So I hope we will all set a very good example of what town meeting government should be and how we as a community come together to make decisions. And with that in mind, I just want to go through just a few ground rules. Obviously, except in circumstances like that, there should be no clapping or applause or calling out or hooting or hollering or back and forth between audience members. Please direct all your comments through me as the chair. We only want to have one person talking at a time, and we want to avoid having any sort of back and forth in the hall. Turn off your cell phones, take off your hats, make yourself comfortable. We have a couple of changes or additions to motions that were printed in the warrant that I'm going to read in to begin. The first one is on Article 4. The warrant as printed provided that the motion would be provided at the time of the meeting due to the timing of the opening of the bids. As I understand it, the bids were open late last week, and so we now have this motion on Article 4. And just so it's clear, when we put in a motion like this, when we get to the article, this is the motion that will be put before you by the town, and it's the motion you'll be voting on. So the Finance Committee motion moved that $3,711,394, $3,711,394 is appropriated to be spent by the town manager with the approval of the Board of Selectmen to supplement the previous appropriations made under Article 11 of the 2015 annual town meeting and Article 5 of the November 9, 2015 special town meeting to pay costs for constructing a new fire station at 4 Fairgrounds Road, including the cost of professional services for design, permitting, architecture, construction supervision, and other related professional services, and any other costs incidental and related thereto. That to meet this appropriation, The treasurer, with the approval of the selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 1 of the general laws, or pursuant to any other borrowing authority, and to issue bonds and notes of the town, therefore, that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less the cost of preparing, issuing, and marketing them, shall be applied to the payment of project costs approved by this vote, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount. Provided, however, that any borrowing authorized hereunder shall be contingent upon the passage of a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion vote. So that is the motion on Article 4. And then on Article 21, which appears starting on page 29 of the warrant. It's actually all on page 29. We're going to add this language that's highlighted in yellow and strike out the language that's highlighted and struck out in yellow. From Section 1, the definition of storage container shall now read, an outdoor container such as fully enclosed semi-trailers, steel shipping containers, cargo containers, and the like, used for commercial storage of goods and materials that are not registered vehicles themselves or situated on a registered trailer or attached to a registered vehicle. This definition does not apply to registered or unregistered boat trailers, registered vehicles, or sheds. So those are the two kind of updates on the articles. Otherwise, we'll be voting on them as set forth in the warrant, subject, of course, to any amendments that people might want to propose. In terms of our rules of order, under the charter, we follow not Robert's rules, we follow town meeting time, a handbook of parliamentary law, which is a little bit more user-friendly, I think, for the layperson than Robert's rules, which can be kind of complicated. And we have a supplement to that town meeting traditions and procedures. This was written by Mark Arnold a number of years ago. We've updated it. It was available out in the lobby, and hopefully you have a copy of it. And I would ask for your unanimous consent to adopt these as supplemental rules of the meeting in addition to town meeting time. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call the articles. What that means is I'm going to run through all of the articles 1 through 27. If you agree with the motion of the Finance Committee or Planning Board, then there's no reason for you to call the article. It would be voted as part of a group in accordance with its motion. If there's an article you want to discuss or that you do not agree with, then you should call out your name and I'll write it down. And when we get to that article, I'll ask for you to either present whatever amendment you have or whatever discussion you want to propose. Any questions about that? Okay, so Article 1, 2, 3, Ellen Ray, okay. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh. Ms. Trost, which number? Seven is the diff. It will not be adopted because there's no motion. Okay. Let's see. 8, 9, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, Mr. McClure. 18. Yes? 18? Miss. Okay, thank you, Mr. DaCosta. 19, 20, 20. 21. Can I have a name? Mr. Demick, 21. 22. 23. Mr. McClure. 24. 25. 26. And 27. Okay. Ms. Williams? 14. Okay, so I'm going to go through these one more time. 1, is that you, Mr. Roggeveen? Article 1? Okay. 2, 3, Ellen Ray, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yes? Number 11. Mr. Barretta. 12, 13, Ms. Williams is called 14, 15, 16. Which one? I'm sorry, could you stand up and really yell it? Okay, and your name? Okay. I will need a positive motion on 15 because that has a negative recommendation. So if you want to go forward with 15, at some point, if you could come down and see town council and get a motion together, that would be helpful. That was 15 and 14 as well, Ms. Williams. 16, 17, Mr. McClure, 18, Mr. DaCosta, 19, 20, Mr. Rynamo, 21, Mr. Dimick, 22, Mr. Rynamo, 23, Mr. McClure, 24, 25, excuse me? Mr. McClure, 24, 25, 26, and 27. Okay. So, yes? Oh, Mr. Vorse, I was just going to say. Okay. All right, so the articles that we have called 1, 2, 3, 11. Excuse me, did I miss something? Yes, Mr. Vorse just called 2. Mr. Vorse had to call 2 because if 1 doesn't pass, we have to do a small amendment to 2. So we have 1, 2, 3, 11, 14, 15, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay. So now, we're going to vote on the uncalled articles. Oh, okay, I see. So yeah, put the D back. I thought there was an I at the beginning. Nah. Fine, okay. And I'm going to recognize Mr. Worth for the purpose of making this motion. Mr. Worth is Chair of the Finance Committee, and that reminds me that I probably should have been a good person and introduced everyone so that you know who all these people are that are facing you. So I'll just do it now. We'll start here down on my right with the Board of Selectmen. We have Jason Bridges, Matt Fee, Jim Kelly, Rita Higgins, Don Hill Holgate, and then Town Manager Libby Gibson. At the center table, Town Clerk Catherine Flanagan Stover, Nancy Holmes, her assistant, Mr. Planzer, our official bell ringer, and then the Finance Committee, Mr. Worth, Mr. Stephen Morey, Cliff Williams, oh, it's too hard to go in order, Joe Grouse, Joanna Roach, Chris Glowacki, Denise Cronow, Henry Sanford, and that's everyone, I think. And then the Planning Board, Linda Williams, Chair, Barry Rector, Nathaniel Lowell, Joe Marklinger, and John Trudell. Yes. Yes. What is your name? Ringer. Mr. Ringer? Okay. So now we're going to vote these uncalled articles. Hereby moved that Articles 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, 16, 19, 25, 26, and 27 be adopted as recommended by the Finance Committee and/or the Planning Board, as printed in the warrant, and as amended by the technical amendments read into the record at the beginning of the meeting. Is that your motion, Mr. Worth? Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. That motion is adopted unanimously. So all of our quorum articles have been adopted, so we don't have that hanging over our head anymore, and we can start with Article 1. I do want to remind people, if you did call an article that does not have a positive recommendation, I will need a motion at the time that it comes up. Mr. Ringer, on Article 8, you should probably come down and see Town Council about that at some point before we get there. So we'll start with Article 1. Article 1 is a zoning article. It requires a 2/3 vote. It appears on page 1 of the warrant. It continues onto page 2 and 3. The Planning Board motion is positive. I'm going to ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading of that motion because it is so long. It is exactly as printed in the warrant. There is a comment from both the Planning Board and the Finance Committee that follows that motion. I just want to be clear, what you're voting on is the motion. The comments are not part of the motion that you're voting on. They're simply informational comments. I will recognize Ms. Williams, Chair of the Planning Board, for the purpose of making the Planning Board's motion. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. I'm going to go, I think, to the Selectmen to introduce this article. Chair Don Hill Holgate.
Good evening. Please let me know if you can't hear me. To be very clear about this article, we're not talking about medical marijuana establishments or any type of personal use allowed in the legalization of marijuana. We are mainly talking about location. This is not about who likes pot and who does not like pot. Marijuana has been legalized in Massachusetts, and Nantucket voted for the legalization by over 60%. We are not looking to dispute that in any way or overturn that decision. This proposal is a temporary moratorium on the zoning for retail establishments and related commercial cultivation, testing, any commercially related marijuana use. It will expire in December of 2018, and retail and commercial establishments will then be governed by any rules and zoning regulations that are in place at that time. There is one proposal up next tonight, and if that passes, that's what would go into effect. It will also give us time to make changes to that if the community sees fit. This article will give us the time to get further public input, to understand the state rules, and to put together final zoning proposals that make sense for the Nantucket community, which we could bring forth at most likely a special town meeting. The state is behind in their regulations. They just established the CCC, the Cannabis Control Commission, and we've just been waiting for them to let us know what all the rules are going to be. It will be too late to submit anything for the annual town meeting in April. This article was put forth under the advisement of our town council because the state rules are still unclear and will not be finalized until spring. We felt it would be irresponsible to not bring this option forward and allow the community a discussion and a vote about it. The Cannabis Control Commission will not issue their final rules until mid-March, and we will not have any special provisions that apply to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard until mid-May. Currently, as of June 1st, a retail store could open in any location on this island where retail is allowed. We do not know if there will be any licensing or other permitting required by the town under the state regulations. We do not know what special provisions will be enacted for the island factor. It is challenging to define and regulate a new use on Nantucket when we don't understand all of the rules yet. We would like to have the extra time to do this right. This moratorium does not apply to medical establishments. Personal use, personal growing of 6 to 12 plants per household, this is for retail and commercial only. As proposed, this is a temporary freeze on zoning with a definitive expiration date at the end of next year. If you are open to any commercial location and don't want to wait to understand the state rules, don't vote for this. But if you do want the time to know and understand the rules and have more thoughtful community input and discussion on the location of retail marijuana, then do vote for this and help us do this the right way for Nantucket. Thank you.
Mr. Roggeveen, you called this. Did you want to speak?
I just wanted to hear discussion and an explanation.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else on Article 1? Okay. Seeing no hands, I'm going to go to a vote. It is a zoning article, so it requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? No. I declare that that is adopted by a declared 2/3 vote. I believe Mr. Vorse is going to withdraw his call of Article 2. Is there anyone who would like to discuss Article 2? Up in the back? Okay. So I'm going to, we're going to just go right into Article 2 then. Article 2 starts on page 3, continues to page 4, 5. The motion starts on page 5. The planning board motion continues to page 6 and 7. Again, there are comments from both the planning board and the finance committee at the end of the motion. Those are not part of what you're voting on. You're just voting on the text of the motion. The motion will be as printed in the warrant, so I'm going to ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading of that motion. And I will go to Ms. Williams, Chair of the Planning Board, for the purpose of making that motion. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Do you want to give kind of an introduction to this? Mr. Vorse? And do you want the map?
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. So the Article 2 is a warrant article to locate where retail marijuana is allowed. This would be allowed in the commercial neighborhood districts, which are the districts shown in red, and the commercial industrial districts, which are the districts shown in blue. These are the exact same districts where medical marijuana is allowed and where this town meeting voted pretty much without a lot of drama to include medical marijuana in these particular zoning districts. Retail marijuana fits well into these. Our experience says that often retail marijuana may be co-located with a medical facility, and the bylaw allows for that. The bylaw also specifies, carries the state requirement of 500 feet from a registered school, and also because of security reasons, calls for a standalone facility. So it asks that you support this, this addition. I think, again, this proves what Ms. Hill-Holgate said, that the town is accommodating this and picking reasonable districts where this use could be located. Thank you.
Thank you. On Article 2, up in the back.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Mindy Levin. I didn't understand why it was in a standalone building. What's the purpose of having it in a standalone building?
Since this is a fairly new product and it has very extensive security requirements, it needs to be in a standalone building so other uses can't access it. I don't know if the chief could help me out on this at all, but I know that there's specific security requirements for this. There's also the concern of mixing this particular use, certainly with residential or other activities that would not be a good mix.
Go ahead, a follow-up.
Do you mean security for the store or? I don't understand.
It's security for the store.
Because there's been a lot of research showing, and I have some of it, that there is no crime, there's no increased crime associated with the legalization of marijuana or the sale of marijuana.
Thank you. Ms. Ray?
I guess from what I can understand is if we don't pass this article, that a recreational marijuana shop can be anywhere on this island. There will be no regulation, so I need that clarified because from what I can understand right now, if we vote no for this, then anybody can come and if I want to open it up next to Ralph Lauren downtown, I'll have a legal right because as written would be that we could do this anywhere. And I don't want to see 20 marijuana shops here. We have enough liquor stores. I think we do need to control that. But I would like to ask, through the chair, Mr. Vorse, to clarify this, if I'm correct with this article.
Thank you.
Thank you again. So if this article does not pass, the retail sale of marijuana would default to general retail sales. So right now, as proposed in the article, it's a special permit in these two districts. If it were not to pass, it would be allowed by right in pretty much all the commercial districts, as Ms. Ray had said, which includes the commercial downtown and commercial mid-island. So.
Okay. Any hands? Mr. Glidden?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to the Director of Planning, I just had a question about, does this apply to the growing of marijuana or just to the sale of it?
So, the growing of marijuana is specifically not agricultural use. It is specifically covered in this article. So this article includes growing as well as retail sales. Correct. This does not affect growing for your personal use. Yes. Yes.
The front of the back section, if you could stand up.
Dan Flanagan, does this include like the paraphernalia for the use of this, or can you still
Hold the microphone, like,
Does this include the paraphernalia?
for the use of marijuana?
Right.
No, this would not include paraphernalia. Could be sold as normal retail goods as part of an array of retail products.
Dan Flanagan, is it possible to put that in the article then? Because right now, according to this, you can't sell anything else but the marijuana, correct?
It's unrestricted. We can't add it to the article because it would be more restrictive than the article currently is. At the moment, you could sell the paraphernalia in any retail establishment, as I understood what Mr. Vore said. Okay, so I think, yes.
So as I understand it,
Hold on.
thank you. As I understand it, the commercial growing of marijuana can only be done in the areas highlighted, nowhere else. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Trost?
Hi, two questions. First off, if the first article was passed because we want time to understand what the CCC comes up with, I'm a little confused why we want to limit the zoning now, not knowing what the state will determine would be best practices. I feel like that's a little imprudent. And second of all, my question would be, why would this not go before the ZBA, and why would it go to the planning board for determination of where those dispensaries would be?
Ms. Williams?
This is considered a commercial use. All commercial uses under the bylaw come to the planning board. That's a simple answer. We really need to have zoning in place. We can always change zoning or expand zoning once we see what they do at the state level in March. If somebody wants to bring forward an article or come to the planning board and ask to expand the commercial uses to CTEC or whatever else we have, we only have 4 or 5 zoning, commercial zones anyway, then they can certainly come and have a discussion with the planning board over the winter, and they can certainly put in or ask the planning board to put in a warrant article. Citizens warrant articles, I believe, are due within the next couple of weeks. I don't know what the date is, somewhere before Thanksgiving. So if somebody wanted to expand this for April town meeting, they can put in a citizens warrant article. You only need 10 signatures. So this is a place to start. It's in exactly the same zones that we've already overwhelmingly approved the medical marijuana. So it just tracks that for the moment. If they want to expand it, we can do that at a later time, but something needs to be in place now, as recommended by the state and town council.
Okay, Ms. Hillgate? And then okay, hold on, Don, for just a sec.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let me just understand what I'm a little concerned about, and Mrs. Williams said you can change this at a further date. This makes complete sense for retail operations, but the fact that it's restricted, that you have to do your agricultural work there, doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I wonder if this could be, has this really been thought out? And can someone give me an explanation? Thank you.
Let Andrew answer, and then you can.
Oh.
What? Go ahead, Don.
Well,
No, go ahead, Don. Or
Okay, there it is.
There you go.
I mean, that was the idea of putting this article in was so that something would be in place when the moratorium expires, because it is temporary. And the idea was to mirror what the community already approved for the medical. There have been some concerns brought up that it might be not quite broad enough to actually accommodate the use, and that's why now we have some time. I would urge that you do vote this through so we have something in place, but that people really start thinking about what they want to see going into April, and then whether we may need to call another special town meeting next fall once we really understand all the rules.
Up in the back?
As far as
If you could give us your name.
Greg Maringer.
Thank you.
As far as the agricultural aspect of that, are you putting hemp into this locations, or is that unrestricted or restricted, or hemp being different than marijuana?
the agricultural restriction is part of the state. The state has ruled that it's not part of agriculture. We don't know what, again, there's some rules and regulations that are being developed, so we don't yet know how that might change. But currently, it's not, basically the growing of marijuana is not covered under agriculture except for your private growing for your own purposes.
And
So-
I think his question was about hemp. Are we addressing hemp in any of these articles?
The answer is no, I guess, on that one.
Okay. Okay. Yes, if you could stand up, they'll get you a microphone.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if this covers a product that is also cultivated called hemp, which does not contain the psychoactive THC that cannabis sativa does contain and is harvested for.
The local bylaw doesn't address hemp, but we don't know what the state will do. But the local bylaw doesn't address hemp. Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Yes, my question is about the
If you could give us your name and,
Christopher Connor.
thank you.
My question is about the standalone dwelling requirement. Is that something where if you had a dwelling with apartments above, would that disqualify it?
Yes.
So doesn't that severely limit the amount of locations you'd have? I mean, almost everything has dual use or employee housing.
It has to be in a commercial zone, and it has to be a commercial standalone building. So yes, it will limit.
It does limit it.
It does
Thank you.
limit it. Okay. So seeing no other, way up in the back, Ms. Levin?
Thank you. Dr. Mindy Levin. I understand the commercial zoning. I don't understand the standalone building. There's been a lot of research, both from the Journal of Adolescent Psychology, that there's been no increase in use of marijuana and where it's been legalized. There's been no increase in crime around marijuana stores. the DEA. There's been 88,000 deaths from alcohol a year. There's been 0 deaths from marijuana. I don't understand why it needs to be limited to a standalone building. I'm afraid this will limit it so much that there won't be able to be a place where this will be able to be established.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so this is a zoning article. It requires a 2/3 vote. Oh, I have a hand up in the back. If you could give us your name.
Hi, my name's Ken Panasak, and my question is, if the housing above the facility was for employees, would that be single-use unit? So if the employees of the marijuana dispensary lived upstairs, would that be considered part of the business?
Again, I think that this particular requirement comes from, it's not about the impact of this to the surrounding property. It's the security of this particular facility. Because this business is only allowed to have cash, because there are protections that are needed for the plants, the standalone facility, and there are adequate spaces in this particular zoning district where that can be built. I think there's the question about the compatibility of apartments over this type of use. And that's certainly something that, as Dawn mentioned, we could change at a subsequent town meeting if we get advice that it could be allowed in multiple buildings. But again, I would urge that we move forward with the zoning bylaw as written now. Otherwise, it's open to really too broad of an area. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, Madam Moderator, Carl Linval here. I would like to point out that medical marijuana has been approved and legalized for almost 5 years now, and we still do not have a facility here on Nantucket. That means that this zone is too restrictive because it's been 5 years legalized and we still do not have a location here. So I would urge that we vote this down. I would urge that if we do vote it through, that the Board of Selectmen look at that we have really, the town overwhelmingly voted for this, and that this is too restrictive. Thank you.
Ms. Williams?
I believe that there are 2 facilities. The Board of Selectmen or Libby could probably give you more information about that. There is another aspect to this, which hasn't come up yet in discussion. The water is federal property. The air is federal airspace. I'm not exactly sure the state has figured out how to get it here legally. So I think there's an issue with that, and they're working on that. And that's, Dawn, I believe, alluded to that they're going to try to come up with something for the islands by May. But there, I believe, are 2 that have already been granted licenses or come before the Board of Selectmen or made proposals. So that is not actually true. And the reason why it was delayed so long is because we didn't know what the state was going to do, and they have other issues with the federal government. And given the intentions of the Department of Justice at the moment, I'm not sure they're going to be so happy to give us any way to get it here.
Ms. Flanagan-Stover?
Catherine Stover, 5 Liberty Street. Back in 2000, I brought forward an article to establish an adult use zone. We didn't have one, and everybody complained, oh, why do we want to open that can of worms? Well, the can of worms could be any place where there was a retail establishment. So Andrew Vorse, God love him, he went to work and he made what I had made an illegal article into something that was workable. We've had to tweak it 3 times to make sure it stayed constitutionally correct, and we don't have a gentleman's club next to the boys' club, which was what was proposed in 2003 by an off-island developer. So please pass this article. We'll adjust it if we have to, but we really need this to protect ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Way up in the back?
Wes Van Cott, Madam Moderator, thank you. This article appears to me to be a veiled attempt to limit the progressive movement towards the decriminalized use. We know that it's legal, but this is a fear-based attempt to limit access to something that the voters have clearly set forth as a direction that we want to go in. The security requirements for this, mentioned in this bill, seems fear-based. There are plenty of businesses downtown that are cash businesses that do large volumes of business during the year, and it seems that this would be just a little bit of an overreaction. I urge the voters to open their minds and think about the fact that things are changing and we have time to do this right, but it doesn't mean we have to shut it down through zoning.
Thank you. Up in the back, yep.
Thank you, Jesse Dutra. I think we need to keep this strict zoning in place. I have 3 children. I don't want them riding a bike and finding a marijuana dispensary in any neighborhood. I'm all about marijuana. I like it myself, okay? But I think given the situation, we just need to be careful where we put it. And I think the comments about we can change it and make it go someplace different down the road is a good comment, and I think it can happen that way, and I think the article needs to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Good evening. My name is Michael Wilson. I'm a local attorney. I am hired by Nicole and Rupert Campbell, and they are hoping to open a medical dispensary here on the island. They would ask you to consider voting in favor of this motion. And while some of the comments may seem legitimate, that it seems restrictive, and if we could see that map, it might help. But what you need to understand is that the state will defer to the town if the town implements zoning, to allow it. If the town does not implement zoning to allow it, the town defaults to the state definition, and I think town council can back me up on this, which is in fact more restrictive than what your planning board has put forward to you. It would be more restrictive for where a medical facility could open if you vote this down. So that map would show fewer colored spaces in practicality. You won't have any colored spaces if you vote it down, but you'll be stuck with the state's definition, not your definition. And so for that reason, take the power that you have and use it. Don't let the state dictate where you're going to put it.
Thank you. Up in the center of the back, and then I'll come down here.
Hi, Ken Panisak again. If we have the power to do this now, what's going to prevent us from having the power to do this in the future so that we don't have to abide by the state regulations? Do we need to jump the gun now?
I think there was someone over here. No? Mr. Cohen?
So I'm Stephen Cohen. I'm another local attorney. I represent the only current license holder for Nantucket for a medical marijuana facility. And I 100% agree that Mr. Wilson's statement is correct, that if you want marijuana to be legalized, that this is a good idea to adopt this zoning. And if you vote it down, you are not providing yourself with more freedom. You are going to default to the state law, which is going to be more restrictive. So it's confusing, but this is better if you want it. It's legal, and there are two, the two facilities that are not open yet are both at state permitting. It's not zoning that's slowing them down, it's state permitting.
Hang on, we have a hand here in the center, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Wall.
Christopher Connor. I have a question of Mr. Vorse about this standalone dwelling. With the outlined areas here, how many, do we have a breakdown of how many of them are actually standalone dwellings and how many are not?
Standalone facility, not standalone dwelling. Both of the two medical proposals are in standalone facilities. And no, I don't have a complete breakdown of every single lot. There are adequate properties in this district to accommodate standalone facilities.
Okay, I think you're probably ready to vote. This does require a 2/3 vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion of the planning board as printed in the warrant. A no vote will defeat the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. I declare that that's adopted by a 2/3 majority voice vote. Article 3 starts on page 7. The motion's on page 8. The motion is as printed in the warrant. I'll ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading. Recognize Mr. Worth, Chair of the Finance Committee, for the purpose of making the Finance Committee's motion as so printed. Yes, thank you. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Mr. Turbot or Ms. Gibson, do you want to kick this off for us? No? Okay. Ms. Ray, you called this, so we'll go right to you for your whatever your question is.
I guess I agree with this 3%, the 1% being the increase, but I would like to know somewhere in that article if we can earmark this money, which would be derived, I would like to know if we could earmark it for drug education or drug rehabilitation or something specifically because of why you're getting this tax. I don't think there's anything specifically earmarked for any of the 2% tax, and I guess there's nothing really earmarked for the one that you all want to add. I guess it's basically because the state's going to get taxed, so we might as well try to get as much as we can. So what I'd like to find out is if we can place in this article, which I see nothing about, the tax revenue. So I'd like to find out how we can put that 3% so that it goes toward drug education or rehabilitation or something to do with why they're receiving the tax.
Mr.
Not
Turbot?
sure.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to see if Mr. Turbot will address that.
Good evening. So in answer to the question about whether we can earmark any of it, we believe that there is a provision under state law that would allow us to do it. We cannot do it tonight because we believe it would expand the scope of the article, and it would be accepting a statute to create a special purpose reserve fund, which we would be planning to bring forward at the April annual town meeting.
We can't do it tonight, but we can do it in April.
I understand that. So do I need to contact you so this will get done, or are you going to, I don't know what the voters think. Maybe nobody cares. I mean, yes, I would like to see it come to the annual town meeting, but I don't know how to write it and to make it right.
It's actually already on the list of internal discussions for presentation to the BOS for the warrant.
Okay. We have your office number, Mr. Turbot. Okay, Article 3. It is not a zoning article, it just requires a majority voice vote. All those in favor of Article 3, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That article is adopted. I have a motion on 8. Okay, so we're going to Article 8. I just was handed this motion, Article 8, 7? 8. 7 wasn't called. We talked about it and then we didn't do it. We're on 8. 8 starts and ends on page 11. It had a move not to adopt motion from the Finance Committee. Mr. Ringer has called the article. This is his motion. I move to adopt Article 8 as printed in the warrant. That's basically it. So I move to adopt Article 8 as printed in the warrant. Is that your motion, Mr. Ringer? Yes, you have to get your motion up on the floor first. So behind you, there's a microphone, which if you stand up, if you could say, yes, that's my motion.
Yes, that's my motion.
Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Now you can go ahead and explain it.
Okay, my name's Randy Ringer, and I wrote the warrant, but I didn't write it for myself. I'm the president of the Tom Nevers Civic Association, of which we have 535 households. Our residents came to the board and said to us that they felt that it was time that a bike path be put on Tom Nevers Road, primarily for safety reasons. Those of you who've been on Tom Nevers Road know that it is a straightaway, probably next to Milestone Road, the fastest driven road on the island. So what I did is we went to the town and to find out when, in fact, a bike path was planned. And they said, yes, we do have a bike path planned, but it's not planned until 2027. So we got back to our residents and felt that that was not something that we could live with. And so we said, what would be an option? And so the option came where you could do a citizens article and talk about it in the special town meeting. So the reason that we really wanted to go forward with this was really for safety reasons. If you look at the Tom Nevers Road in the summer, there are hundreds of children who are going down there with the bike camps, be it Strong Wings or Murray's. There are joggers on the street all throughout the year. There are walkers, there are strollers, etc. And for those of you who know, there's also a project that's being talked about, which is the development of the Tom Nevers Park, in terms of what we call the Tom Nevers Beautification project for the park. Once if that is completed, it will even drive more traffic down the road. So 10 days ago, I found out that, in fact, the town had fast-tracked the Tom Nevers, and they said, hey, we're going to do it faster than we currently are planning. And I believe I was told 2019. I thought, hey, that's great. But when I looked on the website, it is still 2027. And so that leaves me a little bit uncomfortable that, in fact, it will happen in 2019. So what I want is to ask you to vote tonight to say yes, go forward with the development of the project so that we can go to the town and say the town has overwhelmingly supported the fact that Tom Nevers will be the next project that you will go forward, as you in fact have told us it will be. So that's really the basis of the genesis of the article.
Thank you. Mr. Worth?
Yes. David Worth. Just a little background on the Finance Committee and why we took the motion that we did. First of all, design work's going to be started on the Tom Nevers bike path in 2019. There are, 6 bike paths ahead of it currently, and so it's a question of what are the priorities that are being established by our transportation group for the town. And then the third point I'd like to make is that we have a pretty robust capital project planning committee that is made up of members from the Finance Committee, from town administration, and other entities. And we really are trying to impose some discipline in terms of our capital projects so that they're vetted fully by this capital committee, and then they are brought in a disciplined fashion to all of you to vote on. So from a procedural process perspective, jumping a project like this, and it has nothing to do with the value of the project, it's where it fits relative to the other projects, other bike paths that are have been discussed and are under discussion, and do we want to jump it all the way to the front of the line? We determined in the Finance Committee that we didn't. We thought that the pathway that it was on to get it designed in 2019 was adequate. The comments about the website, sometimes that information lags, but we clearly were working on the notion that in 2019 there would be design work done on the bike path, and then subsequent to that presented as part of a capital program, and then for you all to vote on.
Thank you. Yes.
Is it on? Okay. Maria Zoda, 3 Dennis Beach Road. What are the other bike paths that are ahead of the Tom Nevers bike path?
Yeah, I'm going to.
And
defer,
why?
Yeah, I'm going to defer over to my planning department. No. We certainly have we have some in-town bike paths. We have Prospect Street to finish. What else, Andrew? Eel Point, Milk Street. Somebody's saying. Well, Winnett. I mean, there are a bunch of them.
Okay. Ms. Zoda, do you have a follow-up? Wait. Hold on for the microphone.
In terms of the safety factor and the fact that we're going to enhance the Tom Nevers recreation area, I think we should fast track this. And if the design's going to be 2019, when are we actually going to build the bike path? So I say vote in favor of this.
Mr. Worth, can you just clarify one thing? When you say 2019, do you mean calendar or fiscal year?
Fiscal year.
So next
year.
July 1st. Okay.
Let me, if I can respond about jumping a project ahead. We have a very robust capital project committee that looks at things like safety and when they make decisions about where projects ought to fall and what we ought to put forth to fund. We don't have unlimited amount of money, so there are choices that are being made. But the process is robust, and we have been working hard, and many of the members that are sitting here and out in the audience, to put this process in place so that we specifically avoid coming here and then reacting on emotion that we ought to jump a project ahead without knowing all of the other work and all of the other details. So I would really ask you to trust this process. I mean, we are, and in fact, Mr. Ringer brought, as he mentioned about 10 days ago, a much broader thought process about how bike paths ought to be more part of our transportation network. And that's something that I think we've dealt with our bike paths on sort of a piecemeal basis. But this brings up the opportunity to look at how do you build a network that helps with our overall transportation. Absolutely worthy idea that I think we on the Finance Committee would like to see explored further. That's not to say don't do a project and delay it for another 10 years while you try to figure out another plan, but follow a process that we have been putting in place and is working pretty well.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes, thank you all for coming tonight. We had a discussion about this at the Civic League, and Mr. Ringer was sitting there with us, and David and I, we talked about this at length. And I'd like to just bring back a few, just go back 10 years. We didn't have that many bike paths 10 years ago. We've been building a lot of bike paths, and it's very complicated with easements, takings, telephone poles in the way, and lots of other items. There was an article a couple years ago, you may recall, that wanted to widen Tom Nevers Road to make bike lanes. We were against that because we feel strongly, and Mr. Ringer, hopefully this is good, we feel strongly that you need a separated, full-blown 10-foot bike path. Plus, we have the land. On the left side of Tom Nevers Road, we have the land. We don't need to have easements and takings and so forth. So that's a good thing. But on the other hand, somebody has to come in front of someone. There could be people, if Tim Madden was here, I guarantee he would say that Walnut Road is probably the most dangerous road for a bicycle on Nantucket at the moment, other than Quidnet. And there's no bike path on either one, and Quidnet Road is 18 feet wide. So there are lots of things we need to do to improve safety. At least Tom Nevers Road is a straight shot, and you can see a bicycle coming. And you don't have that in other spots that are really dangerous on the island that don't have a bike path. So we do want to do it. It's on the list, but there are a lot of other things on the list. And then you also have, and add to what Mr. Worth said, is the process is so slow and complicated to get these things in for each year. We can only build so much on Nantucket in 1 year. That's another issue that we don't always think about, that we think we can just write a check and build stuff, but it takes time, and it has to be phased in each year. So I urge you to vote down the motion with a very positive feeling in your hearts that we're going to have a full-blown bike path on Tom Nevers Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take a couple more comments. I do want to point out that the motion on Article 8, it is a non-binding motion, just so you know, because the town meeting doesn't have the power to actually dictate to the capital committee what its improvement plan should be. We can make suggestions, and therefore they're non-binding as suggestions. So, Mr. Saperstein?
Madam Moderator, thank you. I am Lee Saperstein. And for the purposes of this discussion, I am Secretary of the Committee on Roads and Right-of-Way, but I am speaking for myself because the committee hasn't had a chance to discuss this or render any kind of a judgment. The committee has a working list of bike paths, roads to be taken, things that we've been discussing for a decade or more. We're happy to report that a number of them have been completed. The Milk Street Path, the Hummock Pond Path, these are good ones. The ones that are missing are the connectors of our 3 beach paths, Surfside, Hummock Pond, and Nantucket. If we can connect those, we will get the bicycles, the strollers, the mothers, the pedestrians off Prospect Street and Quaker Road into someplace safer. Yes, we do consider safety. Orange Street is another one. We need the bicycles in the bike lanes, not in the traffic. These are all projects that would be set aside by the passage of this amendment. And then I would urge all of you to go to our town website and look at the Nantucket Transportation Plan, because it's been presented to us as members of the committee, where you can see a very clear section on bicycles, pedestrians, safety of both, and the proposals of things that need to be built. As a consequence, I think it's pretty clear. I think we should turn this down. and then get Tom Nevers' path where it belongs, in the queue to get built. Thank you.
Thank you. The woman in the back row of the back first section.
Yes, I'm Liz Trujillo, and I live in Tom Nevers. And I've been living here for 17 years permanently. Actually, I've owned for over 30 years. And I have seen the growth, particularly in Tom Nevers West, where there are many, many families with many, many young children. And I'd like you to all take that into consideration. I live in Tom Nevers East, so it's not an issue for me. But Tom Nevers West has a great many families, mothers with strollers. If you ever stay behind the school bus on Tom Nevers Road, you'll learn quickly how many families there are there. And I'd like you all to take that into consideration as you vote for this. It isn't a summer community any longer in that area. There are many, many families, and I think they could use that help. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Ms. Wheatley?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Nancy Wheatley. I also live in Tom Nevers and am off Tom Nevers Road and have been there now for 19 years. And there are a lot of families there. And while Mr. Lowell said it's a straight shot, there's actually a very sharp curve in the road, which is a place where it's relatively dangerous if you're driving and you don't see the bikes that are around the corner. So I do think the bike path is important. I think it gets considerable use, both because of the year-round people and because of people who bike down there in the summer. It's amazing. When I first moved there was no one on Tom Nevers Beach ever in the summer particularly. It was very, very quiet. But it's busy now, and it's busy with both cars and bikers. And it's going to happen. Moving it up would be a benefit to all of us who live there and to the visitors that join us in the summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on the motion on Article 8, it is just a motion to adopt the subject matter of Article 8. It requires a majority vote. It is non-binding. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. That motion is not adopted. Oh, sure. Why not? So all those in favor of the motion on Article 8, please raise your hands and keep your hands raised until the tellers have had an opportunity to count your vote. While we're doing that, just to give you something to think about, the person who called Article 15 has withdrawn his call. So when we get to Article 15, if there's no one who wants to discuss it, we're just going to go right to a vote on Article 15. So be thinking about whether you feel strongly about talking about the map change, sewer district map change on Bartlett Road and Hummock Pond Road. No, apparently not. I gotta call this vote, and then I'll go ask her. All those opposed to the motion on Article 8, please raise your hands and keep your hands raised till the tellers have had a chance to count your vote. I feel like I'm just when we're done with the Article 8, we're going to go to Article 11 on page 13. Article 8, yes, 106, no, 370. Article 8 is not adopted. Article 11. The Finance Committee motion is as printed in the warrant. I'll ask for your consent not to read that. Recognize Mr. Worth for the purpose of making the motion as printed in the warrant. You can just yell, "So moved." Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Mr. Barada, sorry.
Good evening. I called this article, there's the map. The Matica out there, I dealt with this area a couple years ago in regard to get open space to get a public bike path or walkway around the fence area from Matica through to Nobadir, and everybody was gracious enough to vote for that. The reason I call this article is this is one of the last open spaces that the town has that's on the beach that is accessible for pedestrians to get down to the beach. And concern is that we have 3 listings here. We can either sell it to the general public, we can dedicate it as open space, or we can trade it or sell it to the land bank. And my concern is that we may end up selling it on the open market and losing access. To the right there's a dirt road. I wish we could see it on Google Earth, but we had access there on a paper street that was there. We still have access down to that area, but I believe it's 8 or 10 feet wide. It's not really full access, it's more of a path now. So I'm just bringing this forward in regard because my concern is that once we sell it, put a restriction on it, or trade it or sell it to the land bank, if it doesn't go to something that we can all use it may disappear. So I just called it to bring it to your attention that we have 3 options here. I know the Board of Selectmen will do their best for what the best interest is, but we're losing spaces to the beach. This is in the middle of nowhere. People don't go out there much, but pretty soon it may be one of those secret areas that we will know about and other people won't. So that's why I bring it to your attention.
Mr. Vorse?
Thank you. The intent of this article is it's really partly a management issue, and the intent is to transfer it to the land bank. The land bank actually manages some of the public access out in this area further to the east here on Mattoxam Valley Road and further to the west as well. So the intent here is really to consolidate management of the open space resources here under one entity instead of splitting it up among the two. So, I think the intent conforms to what the use that Mr. Barata wants, but if it's not voted, the town will have part of the area to maintain, and the land bank will have the other part. I will note that the beach here is also intended for the land bank to operate in the long term, and the town can leave any easements it wants to make sure that there's public access. But I think we can rely on the land bank to allow public access. They do all over the island. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wheatley?
Madam Moderator, I have a question on this article. I think the issue may be the third option here is to sell, convey, or otherwise dispose of the fee in lesser interest. And that's what makes everyone nervous, I think. Is it possible to strike that from the motion? Yes, I'm sorry.
Number one, you want to strike number one?
Yes.
Well, I guess you could make that motion.
I would like to make the motion to strike number one in this motion.
And can we renumber the rest of them?
Yes, please.
Okay. So is there a second? Okay. So now we're going to be talking about Ms. Wheatley's amendment. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay. That requires a majority vote. A yes vote will adopt the amendment. We'll strike the language that's shown in yellow stricken, renumber the remaining paragraphs. A no vote will defeat that motion. We're just voting on the motion to amend. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is adopted. Back on the main motion now is now amended by Ms. Wheatley. Is there any further discussion? Okay, this requires a 2/3 vote. So a yes vote will adopt the motion as amended by Ms. Wheatley. A no vote will defeat that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That is adopted unanimously. Okay. Article 14 appears on page 15 of the warrant. It has a move not to adopt motion from the Finance Committee. It's been called by Ms. Williams, who has provided the following motion. Move that the Board of Selectmen be authorized to lease or otherwise dispose of lesser interests than fee for a term which may exceed 5 years, notwithstanding the maximum term specified in Chapter 46, Section 46-2, in all or any portions of lots G1, G3, G4, G5, G6, G7, G8, G9, G10, N1, N2, and N3, as shown on a plan entitled Subdivision Plan of Land dated June 6, 2016, recorded with Nantucket County Registry of Deeds as Plan Number 2016-59, subject to Chapter 30B of the Massachusetts General Laws, and a finding by the Board of Selectmen that such lease or conveyance furthers community planning and environmental protection goals. Is that your motion, Ms. Williams? Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Ms. Williams?
The purpose of this article was really, actually the impetus for it was a lot of the contractors that I know have been sort of locked out of where they've been operating for one zoning change or because they didn't have enough room, or Richmond's property is now going to residential. They couldn't afford to buy in there. Most of the lots in the pit, Coffin's Pit, are gone, and they have big operations. They asked me to see if there was land out in the industrial area, already zoned industrial, commercial industrial, out behind the airport, and asked me to put the warrant article in, and I did. It required over 100 signatures. I got 150 signatures, I believe, on this one warrant article. Everybody wanted to sign it. The purpose was to open up land for commercial businesses now that the tank farm has been locked in behind the airport. A previous Board of Selectmen so that they would open up more of this industrial land to interested parties. They would have to put it out to bid, they'd have to apply for it on an RFP process. The tank farm location is completed, and we have Miles Reese, the expansion of N-Grid, community sailing, all locked in out there, as well as several other businesses. This surplus land can be made available to island businesses who are being boxed out of where they have been located, some in residential areas, and they have to move. Displaced by land development, such as Richmond, most are related to construction trades. Many relocated to an area near me, which is residential, but they had nowhere else to go, and there's probably over 30 people on one piece of property. I look at it every day. They would love to go someplace else, where they had more room. This would allow the Board of Selectmen to put the property out to bid without further delays when they are ready. It is simply authorizing the Board of Selectmen to consider putting it out. It doesn't force them to do it, it just simply gives them the power when they feel it's necessary or when the pressure is enough from these contractors to put it out to bid. It doesn't mean they're forced to do it. Otherwise, we have to wait for other town meeting cycles, which will result in unnecessary delays into the future. It doesn't force anybody to do anything. Again, this area was designated, purchased, zoned to accept locally unwanted land uses due to no residential abutters and general industrial character now. We need to acknowledge that there is a real need among the trades for affordable leased or owned property, if now when. It was represented before the FinCom that the airport was making land available for this exact purpose, when in reality larger tracts and costs were well beyond the people I've talked to, and they will not rent from the airport. They asked me instead to put this in, because they knew once we looked at it that this was available. The parcels that the town has control of in this multi-acre area can be leased for smaller lots, longer leases, and at reasonable cost. Please consider supporting our trades. Consider a favorable vote on this article, and again, it doesn't force the selectmen to do anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion, Mr. Worth?
Yeah, a little background on this article from the Finance Committee's perspective. And Linda and I have chatted about this, and I think we on the committee are certainly very understanding of the situation that many of the small businesses, landscapers find themselves in. The airport has open land, and that's what Linda referred to, which is out for RFP. I don't know if the RFPs have closed or not, for lease to small businesses. One of the dilemmas that we have is this land is very valuable. I think that I have been told that the numbers from the airport land that are on lease are $3 a square foot, and that the size that's available are 1 acre and above. Are they half acre? Do you have any half acre land, Tom? So if you do the math, it's fairly expensive. This is the dilemma. The land is worth a lot of money. Unfortunately, many of our small businesses struggle to, and would struggle to, be able to lease the property. The Finance Committee found itself in the situation where we don't want to undercut the airport. Clearly, if the will of the community is to make low-cost land available for these small private businesses, that's certainly your all within your power to do so. But we felt that from a fiduciary perspective that it was important that we maintained the value of the land, and that the normal commercial process go forward for people to find property to house their businesses.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other hands, 2/3? Hang on, okay, I'll come up to you in just a sec. Majority, simple, okay. Up in the back, Mr. DaCosta?
Madam Chairman, why I support Ms. Williams's amendment here, I think we're dragging the cart before the horse. When I was on the Board of Selectmen, we talked about this, and I was approached by a lot of businesses, and when I say business, I mean small businesses. Not everyone needs an acre of land. Not everyone can afford an acre of land. If you're a painter and you have 12 ladders and some staging, you need a small piece of area. 5,000 square feet is more than enough. We didn't do anything at the time when I was on the board because we weren't sure how much land the tank farm needed. The tank farm now is set and they know how much they need. But I just, big landscape companies can afford an acre of land. Small construction companies, painters, carpenters, masons cannot. And before we open this up, there should be some type of discussion through the community as to what the most effective way to use this land is. I'm probably not going to make a lot of friends in this room, but I was not in favor of giving as much land as we did to community sailing. I think we gave away an awful lot of land out there that could have been used by other people in the town besides one entity. But anyway, that being said, I'd like to see the selectmen start the process of getting feedback from the community, from the construction and the trades, and figure out what the best use for the small area, because it's not a lot of land left there. The airport has quite a bit of land, but they're not going to lease it to small, in little small 5,000 square foot pieces. They don't want that much traffic on and off their property. They don't want to have to deal with the fencing and all that. But that's really what we need. We need small spaces, not big half-acre or acre pieces.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, but let me go up here, the woman in the front of the back row.
Mary Longacre. The land is valuable, there's certainly no question. I'd like to say the small businesses are valuable too. In my particular case, I own Nantucket's 1957 fire engine. It's 30 feet long, it's 10 feet tall. I need a place to put it. In June of 2016, I was able to find a place for it, and I had a couple of places to choose from. In June of 2017, I was not able to renew that lease, and there was nothing available for me to park that fire engine undercover. What I've seen just in the last year and a half is that commercial space has gotten so tight, especially for somebody who cannot afford, on the basis of having large business, to pay a lot for a commercial space. So I think this is something that needs investigation, something that the town really does need to support. There's so many really small businesses out there that perform vital services for the community. We really ought to think about how we can enable them to continue on the island. I don't think we're well served by having only large businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
These multi-acre parcels here can be leased for probably down to 15,000 square feet, Andrew. Not an acre, not a half an acre, not having to have somebody at an airport parcel take a large piece and then have to sublet, which had been a problem in the past. I don't know what their stand is on it now, but one landlord would have to take the liability and then figure out how to deal with all the other guys when he doesn't need that much space and can't pay that kind of money. I'd love to know if I've been told that nobody applied of the little guys for the RFP that the airport had put out for these big parcels. I'd like to know if somebody applied for that and how many applied and actually were accepted. That's why I would like to give the selectmen the authorization to delve into this, so we don't have to wait a whole nother town meeting cycle, that they have the power to do it if they find that it's a good idea and they can work out the actual details of this. Otherwise, I'm bringing it back in April, and I'll bring it back for the next one, because we have to just get it on the table to get them to authorize it and let the selectmen make the decision.
Okay. Mrs. Holland?
Linda Holland, Sconset. This is an issue that I feel I know very little about, and I think one of the things that concerns me is discussing major issues at special town meetings. I think this should be held and presented to the annual town meeting so that it can be studied more thoroughly. I'm concerned because I just don't understand it adequately. And we used to have a tradition that no zoning articles, this is not zoning, but no zoning articles should come up except at annual town meetings because it had more exposure, they had more exposure. And we've got some zoning articles coming up that I wish were presented to an annual town meeting. But anyway, I think that this idea is definitely an island problem, but I don't think we should pass it tonight. I think we should study it more, and it should be presented to an annual meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barron?
I'm with Bobby on this. I mean, we do need space for commercial guys to do the work and all, but I know that we're moving this forward to try to lease or rent these parcels, but who's going to be the management company for them, or who's going to run it within the town? The airport has dedicated staff that they're able to oversee the properties that are just off their field, so they're literally there all the time seeing it. It's not like we have town offices or town buildings in that area, so is it going to fall on town people, town employees to management, or is it going to be outsourced to a management company to run the parcels on behalf of the town with a cut going back to the town? Just curious in regard to how it's going to be managed if this does move forward, which it should, but at least we need those steps in place as well.
Mr. Atherton?
Is this on? Yes. This land is indeed valuable, and for that reason, I don't think the town should ever be disposing of the fee interest in any of the parcels out here. No matter what happens here, this is a problem of our own making as we continue to restrict commercial activity in various neighborhoods around the island. The problem is going to get worse. And if we allow any of this property to be sold in fee, then all the other people who might have an interest, or if that person goes out of business, then the value just accrues to that one party. I think the town should retain ownership under any circumstances, and therefore I'm not in favor of this article passing as written.
Okay. Yeah, up in the back.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Dick, and this is what I call the big squeeze, part of the reverse migration on Nantucket. I just met a young gentleman the other day who's a technician for a company here who bought himself a home in Hyannis because he's migrating off of Nantucket. I went to a meeting at the airport months ago about charging employees who work at the airport for their parking spaces, especially during the high season, and they would have to park the furthest away from the main terminal. This is what I call the big squeeze, and we're becoming part of it. I'm tired of hearing this is, quote, valuable land. And if that's all we think about around here is can we sell it for $3 an acre, $3,000 an acre, or even more, we've got a real problem. And it's time to think about the storage facilities that are here. You pay for a small room with a lock on the door, and you can locate your trunks and your valuables in it. Why don't we have an open air storage facility where small business people can rent a fenced-in area? They put up their own chain-link fence with a lock on it, and we rent it to them for a moderate price, a reasonable price, but we do not have to make quadruple profits on every inch of this island. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Okay, no. Please don't do that. I'm begging you. Yes.
Ginger Andrews, Stone Alley. Am I correct in thinking that these parcels are off the very bumpy, very narrow, pine tree encrusted dirt road on the way to Matacacham? Yes, no?
No.
No. Okay, never mind.
you want to explain, Ms. Williams, where they are, where these parcels are? All right, Mr. Vorse? They're up Bunker Road somehow.
Right, so. So as you drive down, there's a paved road, which is Bunker Road, that comes down from the top. And the parcels are served by the road called Industrial Road. So that is a graded and fully accessible road that's interior. So the road that you were talking about is the dirt road that says unknown, and that's running out. That's not the access for these particular lots. And they are zoned industrial, and there's other, Miles Reese's facility is there, the tank farm and community sailing are located there now.
Thank you. Up in the back?
I just want, Ron Mamber, I can't believe after all this time, when Gawacki sold his property, nobody got organized, find out how much property you have, how many quarter-acre lots you can make, how many half-acre, and how many acre. This town operates like molasses in January, and everybody's getting kicked out of where they are in Gawacki world and has nowhere to go. I can't believe you're so slow about getting things organized, how many pieces you can get, what size, and what's the price.
Okay. This requires a majority vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion. A no vote will defeat the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. That motion is not adopted. Okay. All those in favor, raise your hands and keep your hands raised till the tellers have had a chance to count your vote. Are you guys voting back there? Okay, good. Okay. All those opposed to the motion on Article 14, please raise your hands and keep your hands raised till the tellers have had a chance to count your vote. On Article 14, yes, 160, no, 232. Article 14 is not adopted. Article 15 was called. The person who called it has withdrawn his call. It is a motion to take no action. Is there anyone who wants to step in? Okay, then we will just take a vote on Article 15 as a move to take no action. So if you're voting, I hate these negative motions, but if you take no action. So if you vote yes, you're voting to take no action. If you're voting no, you're voting to take action. If that were to pass, we'd have to actually go and take some action on Article 15. Right? I know. So this is why we only do positive motions, by the way, because if I had to do more than one of these in a night, it would be a total disaster. So all those in favor of taking no action on Article 15, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Okay, that is adopted unanimously. Thank you. Article 17 starts on page 17, continues to page 18. The motion starts at the bottom of page 18, continues to page 19. It is a zoning amendment. It requires a 2/3 vote. It was called by Mr. McClure, I believe. Since it's so long, I'll ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading of the motion, and I'll recognize Ms. Williams for the purpose of making that motion. Ms. Williams? Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Mr. McClure?
Thank you. I object to the Article 17 because it was it's posed as being technical amendments, although statutory. I spent some time to look through this particular section and discovered that one of the changes subsequent, I think it's the change to Section 33A, is something that I would consider to be fairly significant and substantial. That section of the proposal, as you see before you, basically changes the law with respect to pre-existing non-conforming uses. Presently, if you had property that didn't conform as to lot size or structure or setbacks, they would be exempt from the zoning bylaw as long as that property was in that condition prior to 1972, and the date that the zoning bylaw was passed. This particular this proposal changes that, and basically would now say that any non-conforming use or structure or lot that has been in that condition for 10 years, for at least 10 years, would be deemed to be grandfathered. In other words, if I build a structure that's non-conforming with the zoning bylaws, and I can manage to successfully get through 10 years without somebody challenging it, then it wouldn't be susceptible to challenge. I pose it, regardless of whether one would agree or disagree with that particular change. My concern is that is a significant change, and yet the planning board sets forth it as being a technical amendment. And I would like to recommend or suggest that in the future, if the planning board is going to set forth amendments of this type, that they provide some explanation to the voters as to what exactly that amendment is going to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to go to town council first. Does this mirror the provisions of 48-7 as they were? Yeah. Okay, so this change reflects a change that was made to state law in Chapter 40A, Section 7. So it's bringing our bylaw into conformity with state law. Ms. Williams, did you?
That's pretty much what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
Our local bylaw is based, in 1972, we accepted the state bylaw under 40A. And from time to time, the state sees fit to change things. And we generally down here adopt what the state is, what the changes are the state makes to Chapter 40A, Section 7. This particular section's been in existence for quite some time. It was either in existence for 6 years with a building permit or 10 years without a building permit. We're not adding anything new. This is already in there. We've already been operating under the 6 and 10-year curative statutes for decades. And so we're just trying to make our bylaw look like the state's bylaw because they're going to trump us. So that's all this is. It is literally a technical amendment because it's just sucking out what the state did and putting it in our bylaw, which is what we usually do. Housekeeping, says Clifford.
Thank you. All right. Anything else on Article 17? All right. It is a zoning bylaw. It does require a 2/3 vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion. A no vote will defeat the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That is adopted by a declared 2/3 vote. Yes. Article 16? No. That was you called 17 and 23 and 24. Let's see. 18. 18 appears on page 19 and 20. 21. The planning board motion starts at the bottom of page 21, continues to page 22, 23. There is a comment. Those comments, again, are not part of the motion that you're voting on. I'm going to ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading of the planning board's motion. Recognize Ms. Williams for the purpose of making that motion. Ms. Williams? So moved. Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Do you want to say anything about this before I go to an amendment or go to Mr. DaCosta, who called this? No. Okay. Mr. DaCosta?
Madam Chairman, this article is defined as definitions, but this is major changes to how we've conducted business in this town for the last 25 years. The ground cover section now is going to include unenclosed roofed overhangs, connectors, entryway hoods, projections, pergolas, playground structures, docks, exterior in-ground and above-ground hot tubs and spas. I have a real hard time with that because there's some days I can't get out of bed without crawling in my hot tub to go to work in the morning. So I don't want to have to count it as ground cover. Window wells. So, I mean, these are major changes to how we're going to conduct business in this town. And to hide this under definitions is ludicrous. Especially at a special town meeting. I would urge everyone in this room to vote no on these. There needs to be serious community discussion. I'm sure that 3/4 of the building community doesn't even know that these things are in here. I mean, I didn't even really notice it until tonight.
Those hot tubs are excluded, by the way.
Not the way I read it. So all this stuff is not going to be in here.
All those things are excluded. It says excluding, for instance, tents, retaining walls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those things that are listed are exclusions.
Then why do we have a definition of what a hot tub is? And why do we have a definition of what an unenclosed porch is?
I'll go to the planning staff for that. They can explain.
It's very unclear what this does.
Okay. Ms. Snow?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Leslie Snell for the Planning Board. So, as the moderator explained, the changes to the ground cover definition are adding exclusions. They're not adding additional inclusions. The changes proposed in this article are clarifications to our existing definitions, and these are proposed due to changing building trends, to evolving interpretations of existing language, and to concerns brought up at the Zoning Board of Appeals hearings when there are special permits, variances, or other appeals from our enforcement personnel before them. The primary intent of this article is to increase predictability in permitting and to remove subjective language from the bylaw. I would ask you all to please vote in favor of this article. Thank you.
Okay. So I do have a proposed amendment from Ms. Botticelli that we're going to put up. And that amendment is a change to the definition of structure on page 23. The motion is to add the language after platforms, more than 2 steps providing access to a structure 2 feet in depth in any zone within a FEMA flood hazard district and with 5-foot minimum side yard setbacks. So Ms. Botticelli's motion is to strike the language that's stricken and to add the language that's highlighted so that it would read more than 2 steps providing access to a structure that are more than 2 feet in depth in any zone within a FEMA flood hazard district and with 5-foot minimum side yard setbacks. Is that your motion, Ms. Botticelli? Okay. So is there a second? Okay. Ms. Botticelli, if you want to stand up, you can ask your question and describe your amendment.
Hello. The one question that I had for the planning staff is the original definition of structure did not include the words more than 2 steps that were more than 10 feet in length. I'm curious why that language was added.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me get right to the right page. The original article, hold on. Under the definition of structure, prior to the amendment that came out of the planning board discussion, there was no mention of steps that were longer or less than 10 feet in length.
Right.
So anything more than 10 feet in length is considered a structure. I'm just curious where the 10 feet came from.
I think that the motivation for that was to make it tighter so that you couldn't have a run of, say, a 40-foot long step or something like that, and that the idea was to limit that.
I guess my point is that 10 feet in length for a step needed to get out of a house is pretty, it's wide, and I'm not so sure why it needs to be so wide.
Right. I think that there was some consideration where decks might have a wider step or something like that.
Okay.
But I think the intent was to put some parameters around it where there were none as originally proposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just to explain the reason that I brought up the amendment to the article, I know that this came up at the annual town meeting last April. I brought up the same concerns about allowing steps into the setbacks in all zones, which is the way it was originally worded. I do appreciate the change to the maximum of having 2 steps within the zoning setback. But I still don't understand why it should be allowed in areas where that are not facing flood elevation issues. And so the 4 zones or the 5 zones that have been restricted from the bylaw are obviously larger zones where if you have 3 acres, you shouldn't have to put your steps in a setback no matter what. But I don't know why some of the other zones weren't restricted as well.
Ms. Williams? On the amendment. Now we're on Ms. Botticelli's amendment.
I'm asking you to vote against this amendment. We struggled with this for quite some time, since April. I don't think you should remove the districts R40, LUG 1, 2, 3, MMD. Some of those areas have FEMA flood hazards, and they have larger lots. The reason why we said, except for R40, that's 1 acre, LUG 1 is 1 acre, LUG 2 is 2 acre, LUG 3 is 3 acre, and MMD is 10 acre. We left the smaller acreage in, which is all of Brant Point, most of town, some of the other areas that have difficulty when they have to come up. The steps generally have to be added because you have to come up 8, 9 feet above floodplain. Some of these are coming up 4 to 5 feet. They look like they're on stilts on Washington Street, to give you an example. When you come up, you have to add steps. Why should they have to go through the rigmarole of going to the ZBA, hopefully to get a variance to do that? There's no guarantee for a variance. The ZBA is giving variances because what choice do you have? But there's soil shape and topography are the only reasons you can grant a variance, not an owner-created hardship. So if anybody wanted to litigate a variance that we've been giving out for some time because of the floodplain, more than likely the variance would be kicked by court. So we struggled with this at great length. I have, in my 20 years on the HDC, seen 40-foot long steps because they go on wraparound porches and they're very wide and they come off the porch and they can get away with that. That's why we backed it down to 10 feet to put some parameters on it. But I think we need to leave the zoning part of this in. So it's only the small lots, the 5,000 square foot lots, the 10,000 square foot lots, and maybe a 20,000 square foot lots because Brant Point has all of those zones. And the old historic are 5,000 square foot. So I don't like this amendment at all. I don't think it accomplishes anything. FEMA maps are changing all the time. They increased the velocity zone recently, within the last couple of years when they accepted the hazard maps. It could change tomorrow, and it could be somewhere else or more extensive. We've got A zones and everything else. I think this is not going to accomplish what you want. And I think there's a word missing if you want to vote in favor of this. It looks like flood hazard district and with a district that requires a minimum of a 5-yard setback. So I don't think this accomplishes it, and I think it actually makes it worse. And they shouldn't have to jump through hoops to get a 2-foot when they had to raise the house, or they made a mistake because grade changes, or somebody messed with your batter boards. This is nuts. Other parts of the bylaw also have allowances under special permit, not a variance, for unintended intrusions up to 4 or 5 feet. We have other things that are allowed in the setbacks, like garbage sheds, propane tanks, retaining walls less than 4 feet, window wells for egress windows, which are quite deep, because you have to have an egress window to get out of a basement bedroom or living space. So 2 insignificant steps that are restricted should be allowed as a matter of right.
Thank you.
As everything else in the setback is allowed.
Thank you. On Ms. Botticelli's amendment? Okay, this requires a majority vote. We're just voting on the amendment. The amendment would be to add the highlighted language and strike the stricken language from the definition of structure. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is not adopted. Okay, now we're on Article 18 as moved by the Planning Board and printed in the warrant. Is there any further discussion on Article 18? Mr. Webster?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chip Webster. I have a question. Looks like in the recommendation, the definition for breezeway was completely eliminated. So I guess the first half of my question is, am I reading that correctly? And if so, why?
Okay, you are reading that correctly, and I'll let Ms. Snell tell you why.
Yes, you are correct. The recommendation includes removing breezeway from the definitions. There seems to be some conflicting ideas about what a breezeway is, and the planning board determined that that's more of an architectural feature and less of a zoning issue, and therefore they would no longer propose that we regulate breezeways by zoning and just allow that to be part of the HDC review.
Hello? Testing. So for clarification, would that be counted as ground coverage or not counted as ground coverage? If there's no definition.
Depending on the design, it would either be considered an enclosed porch or an unenclosed porch. So that would determine whether or not it counts towards ground cover. Unenclosed would not count towards ground cover.
Okay, anything else on Article 18? Yes, Ms. Blaine.
I'm looking, Mary Beth Spillane, I'm looking for confirmation from the planning board that on-ground solar arrays, according to state law, are not counted as ground cover.
We've never counted them for ground cover. In all the years I've been involved with zoning, I've never looked at them as ground cover, including yours. They do count for setbacks, I would assume, but nobody's ever counted those for ground cover. Unless they start it, and then we'll have to put an amendment in and add them to the list, but I've never seen them counted for ground cover.
All right, so on the main motion as printed in the warrants on Article 18, a yes vote will adopt the motion, a no vote will defeat the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is adopted by a declared 2/3. Okay. I am recusing myself on Articles 20 and 22, and Mr. Saperstein, who's my designated alternate, is going to ably guide you through. We're going to do 20 and 22 together, and then, assuming I'm still standing, I'll come back for 21, 23, and 24. Thank you, Lee.
What would you prefer? Handle 20 and 22 together and then come back to 21?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just go right from 20, go from 20 to 22, and then when
Then
I
you'll
come
come back for 21?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, and once again, it's what happens when you don't speak for a little while, you frog up. I'm Lee Saperstein, and I am Mr. Moderator, but if you inadvertently call me Madam Moderator, that would be just fine because she's doing a great job. So, Article 20 is proposed by the Planning Board. And I have to admit, I was warned about this just a day ago, and I've been reading it carefully. I'm not sure I want to read it out loud to all of you. But look at it closely. It's on page 28 is the formal motion. And it comes from the planning board. So I'll call on the chair of the planning board to make the motion. Thank you. And a second. Did I hear one? Yes. So it's moved and seconded. May I ask the person who called this to let us know what the concerns are, and then I will call on representatives of the planning board or the planning department to further explain what's in here, and then we'll go to a general discussion. Please, and your name?
Thank you, Matthew Rainamo. The concern is that there's a lot of confusion, I think, because a few nights ago at the informational meeting for Tacoma Green, I asked whether another vote was going to be necessary. At that time, I was told definitely not. But in reading this, it seems quite clear on the face of these definitions that approval of this article is in fact necessary for Tacoma Green to be adopted, or for the planning board to allow it in its current form. So I would like that clarified, whether this in fact does need to be adopted for Tacoma Green in its current form, and perhaps why we were emphatically told that another vote wasn't necessary the other night, if that is in fact the case.
So let me see if I understand, and that the people here in town meeting also understand. You're talking about a potential new development that would need the passage of this for approval of that development? Do I understand your comment correctly?
Yes, as I read this article, the town meeting tonight needs to approve this article in order for the Tacoma Green project, as planned now, to receive planning board approval.
Thank you. As I read through the article, the essence of it is to use special permit to allow certain exceptions. And let me ask the planning board and the representative of the planning department if I understand that correctly.
Hi, thank you, moderator. So approval of this article is not related to the Tacoma Green project. It's not required for the Tacoma Green project. This article was actually part of Article 75 at the annual town meeting, which did not advance forward. The intent of this article is to allow for more flexibility with site design when there are multiple lots that are part of a single project. It does not increase density that's already allowed in the zoning bylaw, and it does not introduce any new uses that are not already in the zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, are there other comments or questions? Yes, as I understand the rules, you have another minute.
Yes, I don't think anybody's clear on it yet. The numbers in this amendment or this proposed change, it approves a new set of definitions and a new set of numbers. Under the existing numbers, the Tacoma Green project would clearly not be allowed. So why is the Tacoma Green project not affected by this? That doesn't make a lot of sense to, I don't think, me or anybody who's read this.
Before we go any further, we're introducing something new that I'm not sure is germane to the article before us. So I'm going to turn back to the planning board, planning department for their response, and then I'm going to see how it goes and perhaps get the wisdom of counsel on this discussion. Ms. Williams.
I'll second what Leslie just said. We can't particularize a zoning article for one project, period. It's not legal. This article has nothing whatsoever to do with Tacoma Green. It's coming in under existing bylaws, and it will get approved or not approved under the existing bylaws. It doesn't matter if this passes or doesn't pass. What this does is it allows greater flexibility where multiple dwelling units or other structures are involved on multiple lots. Instead of having to go sprawl, I'm from New Jersey, I'm well aware of sprawl, it allows it not to be sprawled. It allows us to concentrate structures in a more compact zone, maximizing open space, allowing more parking and placement and design. It's been talked about at the HDC, it's been talked about at the planning board. Our hands are tied a lot of times when we get these bigger projects coming in because they have to have one on this lot, one on this lot, one on this lot, and parking all the way around all these structures. It's allowed in the CMI, which is Mid-Island, and CN, which is limited zones, and big lots to be able to avail themselves of these changes. It gives them an option on design and placement of structures. Again, Tacoma Green is coming in under existing bylaws and will not be affected by this one way or the other. So it doesn't have to pass, but Tacoma Green can pass with or without it. So I'm asking you to give us the flexibility on design and the HDC flexibility on design, and both boards still have to approve locations of structures and parking and any other hardscape.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or points of discussion? If not, I'm looking around, as are the constables, for any hands raised. Thank you. A yes vote will pass the changes, and a no vote will turn them down. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed, no? In Ted Mack's amateur hour, there are a few of us that remember Ted Mack amateur hour. There was an applause-o-meter, and this needle would swing, and you just knew who won. My applause meter can't tell the difference between 66 out of 100 and 67 out of 100. One is 2/3 and the other is not. So what we're going to ask is everybody who voted yes to raise their hands. All right, as the constables resume their position, all those opposed, raise your hand. And I did forget to mention, but I'm sure you've read it, it's a zoning article, 2/3 will be required. On Article 20, yes, 240, no, 62. That means it passes. And now, Moderator Alger and I have had a very quick counsel on how this is going to work. She has a conflict with Article 22. And so if you would move, please, to page 30, where both the original proposal and the motion appear, and the very last bit of it is on page 31. We will deal with Article 22, and when we're done with that, Moderator Alger will come back for Article 21 and the rest of the agenda. So, Article 22 is another zoning bylaw amendment on workforce rental community. It is proposed by the Planning Board, and if you look at it, it's not that long, but rather than trying to provide you my synopsis, I'm going to ask the Planning Board if what's printed is their motion. Yes, we heard a motion from the Planning Board and a second? Indeed. All right. The person who called it, please, and after that person speaks, I'm going to ask either the Planning Board or a representative of the Planning Department to explain it.
Yes, Matthew Rainamo. I called this article in addition to the previous one, which turns out was not related for reasons no one can figure out.
Let's stay to the point, please, sir.
Sure. This is a motion that's going to allow the Tacoma Green project and potentially others to go higher in height than is currently allowed. So all of the building rules, the codes that we have lived with and built by for years is getting amended in favor of an off-island developer to allow them to build massive apartment buildings. In addition to potentially bending our own zoning laws for them, the project also calls for us to give them the land or lease it to them for $1 a year for 99 years. There's been a lot of talk at this meeting already about how valuable our land is, yet the Tacoma Green project proposes we give away a tremendous chunk of it.
There is a lot of latitude in discussion here, but I don't see reference in the article to some of the things that you're speaking about.
Is this article not about exceeding 30 feet in the Tacoma Green project and others?
In general, it says by special permit upon application to rise to 35 feet for certain projects within workforce rental communities. And so let's stay to the article, please.
Okay. I would urge you to vote no in certain workforce rental communities that want to exceed 30 feet. Concerns about these developments are many, height just being one of them, and I don't see why the town would potentially give away a tremendous amount of land and then expect that we build or that we change our own building codes to accommodate massive apartment buildings built by an off-island developer. And with that, we'll end it.
There are several hands toward the rear of the room, but before that, I think a response from the planning people is called for.
Again, this has nothing to do with Tacoma Green. That is an existing application before the planning board. They have not asked to go over 30 feet, which at the moment is the maximum in many zoning districts. However, downtown, it exceeds 30 feet because most of the buildings couldn't be built again if it burnt down again like it did in 1846. This is not particular to Tacoma Green. They have designs before the HDC already. They have a design and plan before the planning board. No special permit has been asked for. They are capped at 30 feet. This is to allow more flexibility. The HDC has actually asked for this. They have commented on the fact that in certain areas like the Mid-Island, they don't have a lot of flexibility in design, especially if you're trying to get workforce housing above commercial properties, which is why we went to 40 feet in the commercial Mid-Island, which is around the Stop and Shop, and that's a fairly large area down to the marine lumber. That's already been voted on by this body in a majority vote, more than 3/4, more than 2/3 actually, to go to 40 feet there. This allows the surrounding areas around CMI to go to 35 with a special permit. It does give you more design criteria. It does take into account changing in zoning and the topography, particularly of some of the stuff to the west of Stop and Shop. It's been responsive. The HCC asked, we were responsive, we put it in. It just gives you more flexibility, and it's by special permit. Again, it has nothing to do with Tacoma Green, and we cannot write a warrant article that affects a larger area like CN to go after Tacoma Green. It's not appropriate, and we don't do it. It's bad planning. So I ask you to approve this and give us the flexibility that goes along with Article 20 for design criteria and around the commercial zones in Mid-Island primarily and out towards the airport. There's another pocket. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. Sorry, Chair Williams. The hands in the back, are they still there?
Mr. Moderator, I just would like some clarification from planning. It's my understanding that any application that is in front of them now, i.e. Tacoma Green, falls under present rules and regulations that are already in place. Anything that we vote tonight will not affect anything that's already in the queue. Is that correct?
Response, please.
Right now, it doesn't affect, nothing we do right now affects Tacoma Green. Anybody can come in for an amendment for anything that we change tonight. They would have to re-engineer, rework the plans, hundreds of thousands of dollars involved with this. They're already rolling down the permit process with the HDC. They're probably coming into the final stretch with the planning board. They haven't asked for it. I doubt they're going to do it. But anybody has the right to come in under any zoning bylaw, whether it's passed now or it's in existence. But they have come in under the existing bylaws. They're at the HDC under their existing criteria, and it's going to end there more than likely.
Thank you. I am peering around. I do not see any hands. Yes. The microphone just here, please.
Hi, I'm Katie Perales. I'm feeling really uncomfortable with the zoning articles that are coming in for a special town meeting. And my question for the planning board is what the urgency is, in particular with the, I don't know if we can address the last one or this one, but in particular why we're not waiting for annual town meeting where the quorum is larger and you're getting more information from the community on how they're feeling about the articles. So I'm just wondering what the urgency was and why this needed to be done in special town meeting and not waiting for annual town meeting.
Thank you. Response. Mr. Lowell.
Yeah, that came up a couple times tonight, ma'am. And I'll give you my best thought answer. First of all, this body in here right now, most of the people here are sitting in the same seat they sit in April. I don't know what the heck the difference is. I mean, if it was in January, I definitely agree with you. But this time of year is really kind of the same time of year as April. You know, there's no games tonight either, by the way, so that's good. You know, a lot of work goes into these articles, and this particular one was broken up, and not this one here, but the ones that you mentioned previous, was an article from April that got broken up into 3 different pieces because it was confusing and there was some misinformation, and it was better to table it for fall. I'm going to quote Bobby, we're not a town anymore. This isn't 1975. I actually think that fall town meeting is sort of normal now. And, there's nothing wrong with having different things spread out, because as long as we have the same process to get these articles on the warrant, which we do, then, and it's in a time of year where people know that we're going to have it, they can, show up. And there was over 460-something people here tonight. So I kind of enjoy it twice a year myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Topham.
Jeanette Topham, 29 Hammock Pond Road. I agree with Mr. Ranimo, and I do not think that we need to approve higher buildings. I know I'm an old Nantucketer, and I don't like all the high buildings and all of that. So I would like us to take a minute and think about what really is happening to our island. Think about the traffic, think about our resources, infrastructure with water, fire, police officers. We're going to need so much more. So we really need to stop and think about this before we start overbuilding, as we've already started and doing. Thank you.
I know that Ms. Topham appreciates the support, but as explained earlier, we wish you wouldn't. Chair Williams.
Overbuilding has absolutely nothing to do with this. These structures, wherever in the CN district, are going to be built, whether they're built to 30 feet or 35 feet. What 35 feet does at the request of the HDC and the planning board is allow flexibility in design only, changes in roof pitches, ability to put workforce housing, which is restricted to year-round workforce populations, in the third floor or in the second floor with an appropriate design and roof pitch. It does not increase the build-out. The build-out is going to happen regardless. This CN area is right next door, in Mid-Island in any case, right next door to what we've already voted to go 40 feet. So it's coming down. The school is way past 40. The Boys and Girls Club is past 40. The new school is past 40. The police department's going to be past 40. These buildings are already here. Downtown, a majority of the building are way past 30. We did change the zoning downtown to allow town to be rebuilt, because if they got rebuilt under the previous zoning, we couldn't build downtown again. So I'm asking you to pass this. It goes along with 20, and it gives us the flexibility in design so it looks good. But the build-out is already going to happen. These are in commercial neighborhoods. CN is a commercial neighborhood. CMI, where the 40 feet is a commercial neighborhood. Downtown is a commercial neighborhood. These aren't going into residential areas at all. They're surrounded by, the CN is surrounded by commercial. I'm asking you to approve it so we can get on with this, and the HDC has some flexibility. Again, it's HDC and Planning Board that has to approve this. It doesn't get done as a matter of right.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a hand way in the back? No, somebody's got his hand to his chin. I'm sorry. One just here. Thank you.
Just to speak to that comment, I know the CN district, because I own a piece of property in it on Old South Road that backs...
Excuse me. I didn't recognize you as Miss Botticelli. I should have done, and then we would have taken care of the name.
Oh, sorry.
So now we know who's speaking.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so my office is in a CN district, which is right next to the eye doctor on Old South Road. That CN district is 1 block deep, and it backs up to a residential district. So I don't understand why the buildings have to go to 35 feet, why you'd even want them 35 feet in that district. Another CN district is across the street from the high school, I believe, on the other side of the street, that is full of low buildings. I'm not so sure why there'd be encouragement to build those buildings to 35 feet either. So even though they're commercial zones, they do directly abut residential zones. So I have a concern with the broad language in the article.
Thank you. There's one in the back there, and then there's Mr. Barata over on the side. We'll start up there.
Oliver Lafarge, 37 Old South Road. My question is there a specific definition of workforce rental community? And if there is, does the developer need to prove that they are providing workforce rentals in a community? And if there is not a specific definition of that, why is this language in this motion?
Okay, thank you. That is a question that I don't have the capacity to answer, but the people over here do. Yes, Ms. Snell.
Thank you. If I could respond to the two previous speakers. Excuse me. The change in height by special permit is specifically limited to workforce rental communities located in the commercial neighborhood zoning district. It's not all buildings in the commercial neighborhood zoning district. It's only those buildings that are located within a workforce rental community. The workforce rental community is defined in the beginning of the zoning bylaw, and there's an entire section of the zoning bylaw in Chapter 139, Section 8, that's devoted to the workforce rental community and the requirements associated with it. It's allowed through the issuance of a special permit by the planning board, and there are lots of technical requirements that I'm not prepared to get into tonight here, but it was previously approved by town meeting, and the height would be limited to that only. The increased height came up in the context of a discussion about the Richmond workforce rental community. That project includes multiple large-scale buildings with multiple apartment units in each building, and there was a concern expressed about some design constraints because of the maximum height of 30 feet that I think the HDC felt would be alleviated by a slight increase in height. So that's what's proposed, from 30 feet to 35 feet by special permit with the standards that are up on the screen.
Thank you. So the response to Mr. Lafarge is that workforce rental communities are defined explicitly in our zoning code.
Excuse me, not madam, Mr. Moderator, if I could just add one more thing. Workforce rental communities do have an affordability component. At least 25% of the units have to be restricted to people earning households earning 80% or less than the area median income. And all of the units are restricted to rental units, and they all count on the subsidized housing inventory list for the town.
Thank you. I saw a hand over here. Yes. Oh, Mr. Welch.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Stephen Welch. I didn't expect to speak on this. I just want to say a couple quick things. I'm actually an HCC associate. I sat on the Richmond Group application, and I am currently sitting on the Tacoma Green application. This did come forth from the HCC in an informal discussion that we had when we were looking at the fact that our zoning bylaw has been approved by annual town meeting, is to encourage and support workforce housing. On the one hand, we're looking for some place to put our workers, encourage lower cost housing for people to be able to live and enjoy Nantucket. And on the other hand, we're kind of seen some difficulty in building those buildings that don't look like Lego blocks. So what we discussed at the HDC was this concept of that there would be some latitude, a 5-foot latitude, to kind of push and pull buildings up and down as they come into us, having been approved under a special permit, so that we could get more of a sense of additive scale and massing, so that we aren't getting Lego block type buildings. And in fact, I think the fact that the HDC is a strong and independent entity, if Tacoma Green is going through perhaps some changes in scale and massing, is evidence to the fact that this isn't just this isn't a rubber stamp. This is a tool so that the HEC can be helping to get some conformance with the zoning, while at the same time we're not building, again, I've said it 3 times now, these larger Lego block type buildings, which at 30 feet tall and 70 feet long are not typical Nantucket buildings. We're looking for some tools for relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Garth, you have somebody who wants to speak?
Hi, Ken Panasak again. My concern is, as mentioned, this was brought up in regards to Richmond property. We're looking at making changes to our existing regulations to benefit developers who want to maximize the economic benefit to their personal wallet at the expense of all the Nantucketers. So as we look forward, and as offered by people sitting down there, this was done in regards to development. So we're offering this to people to pad their wallets, not to protect our community. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Garth, you've got somebody else. Thank you.
Edith Ray. So we're talking about, as somebody said, an insignificant 5 feet. I'm about 5 feet, and I've never felt real insignificant. And I think that that sounds funny, but it is a significant difference. There's no reason, if they didn't want to make these cookie cutter heights, that they couldn't have some 25 feet, some 30 feet, some 30. They could wiggle around with the 5 feet. I think that it's a slippery slope, but going the other way, going up instead of down. So we've got 40 feet, and now what was 30 feet, we now want to go 35 feet. I think it's just a bad precedent, and I hope everyone here votes against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, remember, the article speaks to special permit for workforce rental community only. And there's a hand in the back. I see you, Garth.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name's Scott Boisher, and I'd like to agree with Edith on this. I think 5 feet is very significant. And just a minute ago, Ms. Williams listed all these buildings that are, progressively getting to, 40 or 50 or 60 feet, and we've all watched them.
I think she stopped at 40.
Okay, excuse me. But among the examples of the new fire station that's going to happen, and the new police station that's there, and the new school, and you notice those buildings. Those are, there's nothing else that catches your eye as you drive down Surfside. You see the new school, and it looks out of place. And if this height change isn't going to change the dwelling capacity for these houses, and it could be worked around in some other way, I don't see any reason to build 5 feet higher. I think it's, again, like Edie said, it's a slippery slope, and there's no need to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Another response from Chair Williams.
Sometimes I'm just nonplussed.
Yeah, remember, it's a minute.
Yeah, I'm speechless sometimes, which is very rare for me. Again, the 35 feet was something the HDC asked for. It's something the planning board's been struggling with. It only applies to the buildings that are providing workforce rental housing. Not every building, not everybody in the Mid-Island, not everybody in the CN. They must provide affordable, to an extent, workforce housing. I've sat here through the last 2 or 3 town meetings where everybody's trying to tag affordable housing on everything. One lot subdivisions, why can't they have one as affordable housing? We have covenant programs, we have all kinds of programs for affordable housing. This allows affordable housing for workers to be above commercial structures and not look like a flat-roofed, crappy building. I gotta be blunt. You've got minimum pitch heights of the HDC. We don't like to approve anything less than 8 pitch. And some of these buildings, in order to get living space up there, have to be less than 8. They look
We've just
like
gone over a minute.
horrible. So we're asking for the flexibility on just those buildings that are providing workforce housing.
Okay, thank you.
In Mid-Island predominantly.
Ms. Topham and then Mr. Patterson.
Jeanette Topham, 29 Hammock Pond Road. I still disagree with having a higher building. I do not like the ones that Richmond has gotten. I do think and know from the Commission on Disability that we approved apartments for the new fish and meat market, and that is not 40 feet tall, to the best of my knowledge. And I have a very bad question, joke, or whatever to ask you. Does the workforce come higher, taller than the regular people?
Hard to top that. Neil Patterson, I would respectfully ask to move the question. Thank you.
All right. The motion to move the question is actually a motion to close debate, and it requires the consent of all of you here. So we're going to take a vote, and that's to close debate or move the question. A vote in favor, we finish. A vote against means we would resume discussion. All those in favor of closing debate, please say aye. Aye. Oh my. And opposed? I think we have it. We're now moving to the main motion, for which a 2/3 vote is required. All those in favor of the motion that we've been discussing on special permits for a height adjustment in workforce rental community, please say aye. Aye. And opposed, no. No. Oh dear. I don't think it made it, but I think the town meeting requires or should have a count of the vote. So, all those in favor of the motion as made by the planning board, raise your hand, please. Right, it looks like the tellers are ready. Those opposed, please raise your hand. So as a faculty member, I was delivering a paper in the last afternoon of the conference, and my opposition was the golf match. It was a little difficult, and the audience kept getting smaller and smaller. Golf was winning over technology. And finally, as I wrapped up, there was one person left in the room. And I turned to him and I said, I really want to thank you for staying through what's been a most difficult presentation. He said, that's all right, I'm the next speaker. So please stay for the rest of the meeting. Well, the Saprosina Plaza meter did work. Yes, 123. No, 207. It actually fails by a majority. And I'm done for the evening. 188, I'm sorry. Oh, I got it. Thank you, Catherine. I'll repeat. Yes, 123. No, 188. It still fails by an absolute majority. 2/3 would have required a 207 vote. Thank you. And I'm done. It's not allowed. It's not allowed.
For you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
That's the only time you are allowed to applaud. So Article 21 starts on page 29, ends on page 29. The planning board motion is a positive motion. There is a finance committee comment that's not part of the motion. I recognize Ms. Williams for the purpose of making the planning board motion with the technical correction that was read in at the beginning. The planning board changed its recommendation after the warrant was published. So when you're voting, the motion will be as printed in the warrant with the amendment read into the record at the beginning of the meeting. Is that your motion, Ms. Williams? Is there a second? Motion is made and seconded. Ms. Williams? No? All right, I'll go right to Mr. Dimick. Okay, Ms. Williams, go ahead.
There's been a lot of sturm and drang on Facebook about this. I've endeavored for the last 48 hours to clear it up. There was some confusion about the new language. I will read to you what is exactly in the current bylaw. Under prohibited uses, use of a trailer or a building-like container for residential purposes or as a principal or accessory building or structure, except for tiny house units or as necessary for storage of chemicals and/or equipment by the Nantucket Fire Department. Use of a trailer or building-like container as a temporary office or for construction material storage permitted only when incidental and accessory to construction activity underway on the same lot longer than 12 months total. These containers that we are talking about are not allowed now. We've had a lot of people come into the office from commercial areas that are asking to be able to have these trailers, and they're usually the 40-foot long container trailers that are sitting on the ground, or the small shipping containers. This article actually expands the ability to have one of those storage containers. What this article does not do is go after anything that is on a licensed trailer, a boat trailer, the landscape trailers, the contractor guys that have those little white boxes on trailers. Anything that has a license on the rear of the trailer does not count for this zoning. It's exempt. Boat trailers, whether they have, we added the new language, boat trailers, whether they have or do not have a license on them, do not count. It doesn't apply to registered vehicles or sheds. You can have any of these things so long as they're on something that has a license. And the license could be in your own yard, because a lot of the guys take their trailers home. They will not be counted for a zoning violation. We've been asked to make these containers available to people by special permit in the commercial zone, CN, CTEC, CI. Right now, if you have these containers that are sitting on the ground, not on a licensed trailer or attached to a licensed vehicle, anywhere in Richmond, they're illegal. Unless they are attached to an active construction site, building a house, building a commercial building. So it does not do what everybody thought it did. I know the person who called it has some of these. They can be allowed by special permit. It's in a commercial zone. So we have actually done something to help the guys that have these commercial vehicles and commercial trailers and these things that are being involved with commercial enterprises. So please vote in favor of this. If you have any more questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But we've never allowed these kinds of trailers on the ground in residential zones. I know I see them all the time. I just do this and pay no attention to them. But they have never been legal. They're not legal now, and they will not be legal in the future in residential zones. So a lot of the Sturm and Drang can be taken care of by just getting a special permit or putting it on a trailer that has a license on the back of the trailer. But nobody's going after boat trailers, whether they're licensed or not. This would be an insanity for the planning board to go after anything on the island that has boat attached to it. Thank you. And I've had 7 boats, and they're just holes in the water you pour money into.
Okay. Anything else on Article 21? Yes, Mr. Glidden.
Through you, Madam Moderator, to the Chairman of the Planning Board, I wanted to ask, I don't see Augie Ramos here tonight, but I know he does have a property on South Shore Road that does contain a number of containers that are useful for small businesses that we talked about earlier, and I was wondering if this article would preclude those containers that are supporting a number of small businesses from being permitted on that location.
Ms. Williams?
We have not specifically taken that particular property up, which I look at every day, because as I mentioned earlier tonight, when we were talking about the multiple acres behind the airport, a lot of guys were booted out of Richmond, another property on Old South Road, and various other locations, and there's probably 30 guys in there. We have not talked about that. He does have a pre-existing non-conforming commercial use on the property. We haven't figured out how to deal with it yet, but nobody's doing any enforcement action on it right now because he does have a pre-existing non-conforming commercial use. So that's better left off the table at the moment, but we're trying to figure out how to deal with it, and we're just letting it go right now because we don't know exactly what to do with it.
Okay. So on Article 21, is the zoning change? It does require a 2/3 vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion of the planning board with the change in the motion read into the record at the beginning of the meeting. A no vote will defeat that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That's adopted by a declared 2/3 voice vote. Okay, we have 2 articles left, 23 and 24. '23 is on page 31. It has a positive motion from the planning board. I'm going to ask for your consent to waive the reading of that motion. It is as printed in the warrant. Ms. Williams, is that your motion? Motion is made and seconded. Mr. McClure?
Thank you. I apologize to everybody for keeping you here on the next 2 articles, but I think they're important. This particular property, 56 South Shore Road, I looked at the zoning map, geomap, and it appears to me that this property, if the article is approved, would go from 2 acres to 1 acre zoning, and that the properties on both sides of this property and the properties across the street are currently 2 acre zoning. And it seems to me that if we approve this, we're approving a single lot, more density for a single lot. And if this lot is approved, then why won't the next door neighbor come and want its lot approved? And in fact, seems to me to be a form of spot zoning. So I would ask that you vote against this provision.
Ms. Williams?
Actually, if you look at all the beige, I guess we're going to call it, That is all LUG 1, not LUG 2. We did Trip Drive across the street. A lot of them are here tonight. We did that for them. It was an old family subdivision. All across the street is LUG 1. To the north is LUG 1. To the east is LUG 1. This lot is a residential lot. It's not more agrarian or horse barn, which are south. As those lots go south towards the sewer beds, they are still 2-acre zone. This lot was left out when we did the Trip Drive and the rest of the stuff to the east and north because the family wasn't here. They were sick. I know this property very well. Friends of mine used to own it. It's got a single-family dwelling on it. And the couple came to the planning board to ask us to put it in because they weren't here and they were ill. There was a family sickness. So we put it in for them because it shouldn't have been left out in the first place. They just were unaware that everything across the street to the north and to the east was already gone into LUG 1. So we're asking you to, there's a doctrine of fairness here. It isn't going to create more than another lot. They have more than enough septic. They have more than enough land for everything they need to do, just like everybody to the north, the west, and the east. So we're asking you to put them in out of fairness. We're not coming in with anything south of that. That's a lot more pastoral. But this lot is a residential lot with no horses on it, no pastures, no nothing. So I'm asking on their behalf for you to go ahead and approve this like we've approved everybody else around them on 3 sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McClure?
Do we have a zoning map that can show exactly what the zoning of the adjacent properties are?
It shows on the map.
Right, but so the properties to the south of that is LUG2.
Right. Everything in the dark brown is LUG 2. And
yes.
everything in the light is LUG 1.
So that the property next to it in a southerly direction is currently LUG, so there would be just one more lot that goes into LUG 1, and my point would be that then this will just creep right down Old South Road, and it'll be one property after another with people asking to be rezoned.
Before I go back to you, Ms. Williams, is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this? Yes, the woman in the center in the back. Yes, I'm sorry, you're not really in the back. You're in the back of the front, but it's
Leslie Forbes. I've heard comments earlier tonight about trends on Nantucket to increase density, to increase height, to not take care of the people who live here to the benefit of others. I've been to several town meetings where South Shore Road is just changing. There's a citizens petition or a planning board petition in just about every town meeting about South Shore Road, and I'm going to defer to Nat over there. I don't know whether this is down zoning or up zoning, but it does seem to have the large potential to increase density. We've talked about it earlier on other articles tonight, and I just wanted to bring it up on this article and the next one too, that it has the potential to increase zoning, increase density.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
I was involved with the Surfside Area Plan. The Surfside Area Plan was divided into Surfside East, I believe, North, and West. We're in West. We are predominantly year-round residents of the Badlands. We kept creeping down the road. It came up during the Surfside Area Plan work group discussions that this area was zoned 2-acre back in 1972 because nobody wanted to live out there. We had no idea what was going to happen out there. Since then, it was affordable land for all of us, including myself, which is much farther forward. of this property because we could buy it, and my realtor tried to talk me out of buying it because I was so close to the sewer beds. So we have been creeping, yes, down South Shore Road. But if I recall correctly, the planning board wasn't going any further than this lot because the lots below that, some of them are bigger, some of them have horses on them, and they're much more rural, shall we say, in character. Even with going to 1 acre zoning on this lot, 93% of each of the 2 lots that would be created is still open space with no ground cover calculation applied to it. So de facto, you have 93% open space with no ground cover calculation on both lots. So they can put 2 houses on there right now. They can even put a tertiary dwelling on there right now. Going to 2 lots on this guy isn't going to hurt anybody anywhere on this island. And most of us work for a living back there, and we are just barely all hanging on to our properties, and most of us have subdivided or given things to our kids or plan to do so when they move back to Nantucket. So please give this guy a break and allow him to have his 1 acre zoning like everybody else around him. We're not going any further because the planning board really wasn't looking too favorably on that.
Thank you. Okay. This requires a 2/3 vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion. A no vote will defeat the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Okay. So we're going to do a hand count. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Keep your hands raised till the tellers have counted your vote. I have 2 pairs of eyewear up here from, I think, from the annual. There's a pair of really well-chewed readers in a case. If they are yours, you may have them. And then, I don't really know what these are, but when you look through them, everything's green. I know, maybe. So these are someone's too. Anything? Okay. All those opposed to the motion on Article 23, raise your hands and keep your hands raised till the tellers have had a chance to count your vote. And then we're going to go to our last article, Article 24, on page 31 and 32 and 33. I don't know why I'm laughing. I just can't believe. Okay, on Article 23, yes, 113, no, 109. Two-thirds would be 148. The article is not adopted. So Article 24, our final article. Planning Board motion is on page 32. I'll ask for your unanimous consent to waive the reading of that. I'll point out that the two comments at the end are not part of the motion that you're voting on, and I'll recognize Ms. Williams for the purpose of making the Planning Board's motion. Motion is made and seconded. Mr. McClure?
Thank you. This is the 4 lots on South Shore Road, consisting of a little less than 13 acres of land. It's 4 lots now. If you go from 2-acre zoning to 1-acre zoning, that would seem to be maybe 12 lots could be created out of this. The other thing that I would point out is that these lots, this particular property, has been the subject of the same proposal at several annual meetings, town meetings. It was Article 52 in the 2014 town meeting, Article 56 in 2015 town meeting, Article 57 and 58 in the 2017 town meeting, and in each case it was defeated. I'd ask you to defeat this motion or proposal.
Ms. Williams?
Hopefully this is the last time I have to get up. I'm sure you'd be happy with that. He is correct that it has come before us a couple of times. One time, I'm going to have to read this because there's so much going on here. It was put in by the Planning Board a few years ago when we were looking at South Shore Road in general. It was inconsistent with the master plan, which we all voted on, to maintain this property in the LUG2 zone. We made a recommendation to take it out of that town meeting until the family came back to us with more information on the development of the property. Subsequently, the family put in the family before this owner, put a citizens article in which was debated at the 2015, I guess, annual town meeting. Misinformation was, and last year again, misinformation was put on the floor that confused the matter and aligned it with our island home issues, development scares, incorrect zoning information, and the like. It was then voted down. The property has since sold, and the new owners have indicated that they want to do a development that will be inconsistent with the LUG2 zone, 40B, which is unsupportable because of the surrounding land use pattern and location. They are immediately south of Sachem's Path and the Housing Authority. The Badlands, everybody knows, I have it on my license plate, has 4 40Bs in it already. This would be a 40B on the sole access road for the entire area. From a planning point of view, if we go to LUG 1, or 40R, right? R40, 1-acre zoning, which is what the pink is on here, and it's directly south of much more dense zoning, it would give the developer more options to not do a 40B. The town district, which is all around it, I don't think that's on this map, which runs through more than 75% of the property now. The remaining portion to the west would be put into the town district. The green is the town district, Andrew. So it has water in front of it, it has sewer in front of it, it has the shuttle in front of it, it has the bike path in front of it. It would be consistent with the zoning across the street, which is already R40, the density to the north of it, and the density to the south of it. It also bordered on the north, again, by 3 40Bs, 2 at the Housing Authority, 1 at Sachem's. It allows the Planning Board for a reasonable discussion about development options with the new owner. Absent a reasonable and consistent zoning designation of this land to 1 acre, like the rest of the Badlands for the most part, it is likely that another 40B will be sought here, resulting in overconcentration of 40Bs in the South Shore Road neighborhood, who is taking the hit for the rest of the island. The Surfside Area Plan also mentioned the amount of 40Bs and affordable housing scattered throughout the boulevard area as having an undue burden on Surfside West, and that we didn't want any more 40Bs in Surfside West. My intent here from a planning perspective is to have the best defense that maintains local control without a 40B and that is sensitive to the area. We all know that some development is happening on this property. There are going to be some changes here, and it's not going to be under LUG2 one way or the other. That is the reality. This is our best tool to negotiate a better outcome on this property from the planning perspective that potentially work for both neighbors and new owners. Keeping it in LUG2 guarantees an adversarial outcome and will not keep it from being developed. It is an oasis and will not remain so. Land bank has already passed on it. This brings it into compliance also with the master plan and the Surfside Area Plan. I'm asking you to please approve this and give us more tools at the planning board and the neighborhood of negotiating a much better development. It's going to go one way or the other. Voting it down is not going to stop it from having up to 64 units, which was what was being kicked around before. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, up in the back. If you could, yes. Mr.
Hello. Yep, my name is John Wagner. I live on Quint Street, a little bit far from this, but I wanted, picking up on Mr. McClure's point, if we're not getting into one of these death by 1,000 cuts situation, I think everybody in this room last July and August probably at one point or another was on Surfside Road, Old South Road, or Hummock Pond Road, and you saw the traffic. I'd just like to leave two thoughts with this, with the group now on this, that we've watched around the country and around the world with airline regulations now calling for 2 and 3 hours for getting to airlines because of all the regulation and inspections necessary. It's hard enough getting to Nantucket Airport now, but July and August, we're going to have to be adding another 1 Nantucket hour to get out there. The second thing is, these roads, again, as I say, there's a lot of stuff going on there now and a lot of houses going in those areas. Not so much the Sconset Road, but the others. And if you drove on those roads last summer, you've only seen a harbinger of what is already coming there, but is not there yet. And to add on to this just seems to be going the wrong direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, up in the back, Mr. Linval.
Hi, Carl Linval. I'm a little tired of 40B being the constant threat on the meetings, and it's my understanding that Planning Board has come forth with a town plan which will work towards a goal of achieving the 10% ratio that Nantucket needs in terms of low-income housing. It's also my understanding that with current projects with Richmond Great Point Development and Sachem's Path, et cetera, we are going to be around 8%. And so I feel that these are really good talking points to combat an unfriendly 40B, as it's been known to call. So I really don't feel that we need to increase the zoning as a potential risk. I think the Board of Selectmen would really need to combat, along with the Planning Board, anybody who would want to put something like that there.
Thank you. Yeah, way up in the back.
Good evening. My name is Joan Stockman, and you may remember me from the April town meeting where I spoke about how I really didn't want the zoning to be changed in our backyard, which is, we're on the south, I guess, of that large swath of land. And a couple of things kind of breaks my heart, but I feel like this time around I can't really support voting this down because there is nothing that the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board can do if somebody decides to put a 40B in there. And correct me if I'm wrong, that is my understanding, that if we were a neighborhood of people with deep pockets, we could probably pause the process, slow the process down for a period of time, but what is most likely going to happen is that there would be up to 60 plus homes built back there with a 40B, and I don't feel like I can in good conscience ask you to actually vote for this, but I would really want you to think about how is it possibly the best of two really awful decisions in terms of the overdevelopment and just kind of losing the Nantucketness of this part of the island. And I also would note that just because if we do decide this evening that it is going to be R40, it doesn't mean that they can't put in a 40B anyway. They can kind of do what they want to some extent. So sorry about all the bad news, but there you go.
Mr. Lowell?
I really appreciate Mrs. Stockman's comments. I didn't think that was coming. Listen, I want to talk about this from a completely different perspective with my 1 minute and 40 seconds I got left. This is about balance. In the end, like this side of the island was left out in 1972. It's that simple. Hummock Pond Road, all the way to the pond, is R20, except for one spot. Do you know that the Larrabee property is in half-acre zoning? Anybody look at the zoning map? Half-acre, okay? That's a long way further out of town than this. It's just how things, the on-high of 1972 when those three guys said, this is what we're doing, and pada bing, boom, that's what happened. The people that owned all the land on Nantucket back then got what they wanted. They got a zoning district that really wasn't really zoning. It was sort of the Wild West. We can do anything we want, 50% ground cover, 5,000 square foot lots, build anything you want. This area got left out. So whether it would be today's issues of the pressure of running out of dirt, see that? I said dirt at the town meeting. Every year I have to say dirt. It's true, though. Where the pressure is on in this area simply because it's middle-income, regular, local, yokel people that own the land. And that's the next area. Now, 106 Surfside wasn't long ago. We've kind of forgot. 106 Surfside, that was only like 2 years ago? 3. That area was in Lug 2, in the sewer district, like this is in the sewer district. And this is actually too close to the school for a bus stop, which is kind of interesting in 2-acre zoning. So I urge you to pass the article and think about the balance, think about the inevitability of this area is what it is, and it has to get rectified at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Blaine? First map back.
Mary Beth Splain, and Jack and I live at 11 South Shore Road, which is the property just to the south where that little pink rectangle. And I, along with Joan Stockman, really spoke against this article in April. And I, like Joan, have changed my mind, and I wish there was a way the planning board could assure us that if we do vote on this, that the developer will not build a 40B, but I don't think we can get that assurance. So I'm just saying tonight that I have, like Joan, my neighbor, reluctantly changed my mind, and I think that this is the best of two very bad options.
Yep, right there. Yes, just.
Libraries. I just have a point of clarification I'd like from the planning board. Given all the advances that are going on Richmond property in getting to our 10% of affordable housing. Doesn't the state rules say that as long as you're making increases of 1% a year, that precludes any further 40Bs from being developed during that time? You don't have to be at 10%. As long as you're making progress, that stops the development of more 40Bs.
Yes, so what you're referring to is a safe harbor. So because Nantucket has a approved housing production plan, if it creates those units, and I believe it's, Tucker, help me out here, 1% is it? Or 1% gets you a 1-year safe harbor, and what is it, 2% gets you 2 years, I believe. So the key is, though, when those come online and when those are counted. So Richmond and anything else needs to be built and have a certificate of occupancy in order to count. 40Bs that are approved do count instantly. So unfortunately, we're not at one of the safe harbor provisions at this moment.
Thank you.
Mr. Linfall?
Sorry, two questions. One was curious if we know who this developer is, if they can be named, and two is asking, is Linda Williams bringing? I see her name attached to this, and maybe it's my misunderstanding of articles. Is she bringing this as a planning board member, or is she representing them in some manner?
Ms. Williams?
We put a lot of these in under my name because the planning board didn't have a meeting when the deadline was taking place to do it. The planning board voted to support these articles with a favorable recommendation. So we put it in because it didn't go through, and between last April and now, the property was sold, and the issue came up. I can't tell you who the guy is. It's not my right to do that. However, he's already done a 40B here. And the 40B conversation has been happening in the office. So it's not something that was a pie in the sky like we threaten 40Bs all the time. This subject has come up. The original number was 64 more units. I don't believe that's the number now. As Andrew said, we do not have safe harbor to stop another 40B. There's some of the history about the 40Bs on South Shore Road. There were court cases on one of them. The DHCD did say that they don't like 40Bs all in the same area, but it just so happens we're not wealthy people back there. The neighbors aren't wealthy, and it's hard for anybody to fight them. There was a lot more money to fight 106 Surfside, which is why it was changed. This body changed the zoning at 106 Surfside to 1 acre zoning, so it would be sold to a private developer who had something else in mind other than a 40B. Changing this to 1 acre zoning, when it's next across the street from 1 acre zoning, north of 1 acre zoning, south of 340Bs, would give him more options on the 1 acre. They can do residential development. They've got a lot more options, and we don't have any excuse if it stays 2 acre. The only way to get it less than 2 acre for a developer is to go for a 40B.
Thank you. Mr. Glidden?
Madam Moderator, I would just like to advocate the folks at town meeting to not pass this article. I feel that, although I greatly respect Mrs. Splain's views, I think it's important for the town to maintain its ability through 40B to negotiate the creation of affordable housing, which is why 40B is in place there. I think there is a number of instances in which we are seeing development come along and moving us towards safe harbor, and I don't think that even though we are not in safe harbor, that we are absolutely excluded from that scenario in which a 40B would be built here happening. But I will say that I think 40Bs aren't necessarily that bad, and I would agree that we need more affordable housing. So I would encourage you to vote down this article.
Okay. So this motion requires a 2/3 vote. A yes vote will adopt the motion. A no vote will defeat the motion. All those in favor of the motion as printed in the warrant, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Okay, we'll do one more hand count and then we're going home. All those in favor, please raise your hands and keep your hands raised until the tellers have had an opportunity to count your vote. Oh, I don't even think it's going to be close, but... Okay, we're running the credits, so you can... I have to give attribution for that comment to Mr. Novissimo here behind the curtain. I also have Woody's iPad. This was found up by the camera way in the back. So I'm going to give it to the town clerk, I think, and she can bring it to her office. So if you know someone named Woody who's missing his iPad, it will be at the town clerk's office. Is that all right, Catherine? Oh, she's counting. Well. All those opposed to the motion on Article 24, please raise your hands and keep your hands raised till the tellers have had a chance to count your vote. It's really close. Oh, well. What did you guys vote? I could just go tell her. What did you vote? A no? Well, you know what? I didn't vote either. I'll stay by it. We're good. We're all set. Okay, on Article 24, yes, 127, no, 93. That motion is not adopted, 2/3 being 147. I will recognize John Hill Holgate, the Chair of the Board of Selectmen, for the purpose of making one final motion, the motion to dissolve the meeting. Just say so moved. Okay, is there a second? I'll take that as unanimous. Thank you. No, not necessary.